I think it might be on your end, man.
Let me see.
Just we are going live, but just dealing with a slight echo.
It's delayed real quick.
Yeah, I've heard echo on my end before too, but I don't hear it right now. Or I don't hear it on your voice either, Mason. I don't hear the echo coming through on my end, so that means it's probably not in the recording.
Let us know in the chat, guys, if you can hear any echo, and if not, then we'll just get it rocking and rolling. I can't hear it on my end, so is it pretty distracting, Mason?
No, give me 1 second.
Yeah,
it is pretty distracting, but I think I know what the problem is.
Yeah, cool. We'll give you a minute to sort that out, man.
At some point, Jay, you got to tell me what kind of webcam you're working with there. That thing is like 8K, my guy.
Yeah, honestly, I'm absolutely special when it comes to technology, but my brother's like a nerd for it, so he knows all this stuff, and he reckons.
Right.
Vinny, what's the camera called? FX3. FX3. So you can tell your team.
All right.
All right, you ready to rock and roll?
Yeah, let's
do it.
All right, fantastic, gentlemen. So, guys, welcome to the second live Rattlesnake TV debate between Royce White and Mason. You guys all know Royce White from the campaign trail and also from our videos when we've covered Royce and his debate with David Pacman, as well as Royce's interview on the channel. We've also got Mason, who was on the very viral Jubilee debate against Charlie Kirk just a few weeks ago. We also covered Mason on the channel. So Royce threw down the gauntlet with me this week and he said, anybody, anytime. I messaged a bunch of people and Mason heeded the call. So Mason, I want to tip my hat to you, brother. Big respect for that. It's not easy coming on away turf and doing these debates. So I really appreciate it. And I'd ask everyone to keep it respectful tonight. If you guys would like to find Royce and Mason, the links will be down below. We've got the social medias and also Royce's podcast. And Mason, you're on Twitch as well?
Yeah, I'm on Twitch right now, but everything's at One Hand Politics, regardless of what social media platform it is. So if you want to find me,
One Hand Politics. Excellent. My links will be below as well, guys. A few pre-show notes. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Of course, if you're getting value from Rattlesnake TV, we want to be doing lots of these debates in the future. Mason, if you could put me in touch with some of your friends who would be interested in debating, that would be fantastic. There's going to be a pretty free-flowing debate, guys, similar to the VP debates and the presidential debate, where we'll be covering all of the most important topics. We're going to start with abortion. We're going to start with economy, followed by the border and immigration. And we're going to be going into democracy. Is it under threat? Foreign policy, and then abortion. Each person will get to make an opening statement. No time constraints. You guys both know how to make a concise point, so that shouldn't be a problem. And then we're going to get into some dialogue. Each person will be able to make their opening statements, and then whoever starts the opening statements, the other person will start the dialogue, and you guys will both get a chance to cross-examine each other. And then at the end, if you guys want to tie up any loose ends, we're going to have a free-flowing back and forth. So as the moderator, I will only be intervening if you guys are talking over each other. And also if we need to move the topics on, I'm going to jump in as well. But like I said, it's going to be pretty free-flowing, so not many regulations on this one. And last of all, guys, super chats will be read in between each of the topics. So after the first one on the economy, you guys can get your super chats in, and then you can ask these gentlemen questions and they will get a chance to respond. So keep them respectful, guys, because we do reserve the rights to not read out any ones that are TOS that'll get me in even more trouble than I'm already in. So with that, guys, to that end, I'm going to kick the debate off with Mason. If you don't mind starting, you're on away turf here, so I figured I'd give you the chance to open up with the economy.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm surprised that I was invited on, not to dog my own accolades, but I feel like I'm somebody with a much smaller platform. I'm talking with a prospective senator right here. So it's interesting on the matchup that we got. I'm just curious on what made you guys want to choose me before I go ahead and begin with my points.
Well, I actually was quite impressed. I mean, this is kind of a question for me, but I was quite impressed with your performance on the Jubilee debate. I thought you debated in pretty good faith, and I put it out there, and then you took the call, man. I messaged a lot of people and nobody wanted to do it, so that's why. For
sure. Cool. Well, I guess I'll go ahead and begin. I'm sure if you've seen my stuff, how do I refer to you, Rattlesnake? I'm so sorry. What
just name? Jake. Jake's good.
Okay, perfect. And do you prefer Royce?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool. So Jake, yeah, if you've watched any of my content, then you know that I'm somebody who votes based on harm reductive purposes. I'm not somebody that is a big Kamala Harris fan. Most of the establishment Democrats I disagree with, both on economic policy, domestic policy, and foreign policy. But when I look at two candidates that have the viable option of becoming the new executive in chief, I do have to make a decision based on pragmatic purposes. And so for me and my organizing goals, I can do that much easier under a Kamala Harris administration than I would under a Donald Trump. But if we are comparing specifically economic agendas, I think that Donald Trump really has only promised to increase tariffs. That's like the only tangible policy that he's laid out as far as what he would change to our current economic platform. As well as decreasing taxes, especially for people within the 1% of income earners, and then somewhat decreasing taxes as well for people that are working in middle class. What I think it's interesting is he put caps on when those taxes were going to expire. So, for example, his 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is set to expire in 2027. It's interesting to be how those specific tax cuts have an end date or an expiration, where others he wants to continue indefinitely, especially for those that already live pretty comfortably within the United States. One thing that I saw about Royce, I didn't know too much about you before going into this debate, but I took about a half hour just to look up some of the stuff that you said. And you're someone who reports himself as a populist and who cares about working class people. I would find that we would find a lot of common ground, arguing that we should be helping people right now who are really putting their backs on the line, who are building the economy, instead of those that already live comfortably and tend to utilize that economic mobility in order to make it easier for them to accumulate more wealth. But we'll see as the debate goes on. I think that, again, in contrast to Donald Trump, Kamala Harris has offered somewhat of pretty tangible economic plan. I don't think that it goes as far as it should, but I do think that it's good to increase the child tax credit. Not only do they want to reinstate the $3,600 tax credit that was put in place in the beginning of the Biden administration, but they also want to increase that to $6,000 for the first year of new families. So if you are somebody who cares about working class families and you want to increase their economic mobility, then this is one of the best policies to enact. We can continue to go into more. I don't know what my time limit is here, but essentially, I think that Kamala Harris utilizing the apparatus of the presidency to try to make it easier for working class families is something that should be encouraged, not something that should be a stark criticism first.
All right, go for it, Royce.
Well, first off, thanks for being here and accepting the debate. Thank you, Jake, for organizing it. I appreciate that. I've been drawing blanks on being able to debate anybody. I'm being afforded the opportunity to debate Amy Klobuchar this Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Central Time. For anybody who wants to tune into that, I think it's going to be hosted by and streamed by WCCO Radio. So a little shameless plug there. But I think one of the reasons why people are reluctant to debate me, and again, I'm thankful that you answered the call, is because I talk about issues from a more historical standpoint, and I would say a more 30,000 foot view, and I think that's good reason for me to be going for United States Senate. That's certainly something that falls in the scope of what a United States Senator is supposed to think about and certainly vote on. But I would start off by saying I don't really even think there's a debate whether or not Donald Trump is a better option than Kamala Harris on this basis alone. The post-World War II democratic liberal order, otherwise known as the international rules-based order, has failed. It has failed up until now, and it continues to fail, and it will continue to fail because its fundamentals are dishonest. And first of all, Donald Trump's the only candidate in this election, and maybe one of the only presidential candidates or presidents since JFK that actually threatened to destabilize or change that world order, that status quo. Now, a lot of people on the left, the liberals, will say, oh, well, it's conspiracy theory. There is no post-World War II democratic liberal order. There is no international rules-based order, which is completely dishonest on face value. Of course there is. In fact, the reason I say Donald Trump is the clear choice is because Kamala Harris not only is serving that world order, but she publicly and brazenly claims to want to defend that world order, even to the point of a nuclear war if necessary. And we can talk about that as we go along here. But the reason, first I'll start by saying the reason that the world order has failed is because it was based on dishonest premise. The premise was, after World War II, we would bring freedom and democracy all around the world by peace through strength and make nations self-determining. We didn't make any nation self-determining around the world, none of them. None of them are really democracies. They may say they may have a democratic process, but really what they are subsidiaries or, reverse vassal states of a global military empire ran by the West, specifically the United States' military prowess. And what we've essentially done is any nation that had a democratic process or was trying to practice democracy, at any given moment, we will intimidate, bully, subvert the regimes, whether they be democratically elected or not. And we've proven that a number of times. And for that reason, the American people, what they tried to protect is this global economy, this United States dollar hegemony in the global economy. And the United States dollar is considered our greatest national interest, and it is become a very effective military tool. And we will defend it at all costs. And it's used as a justification to perpetuate war, and as well as other things, but mainly war, and not even so much kinetic war as much as the justification for the American taxpayer, working class, middle class, and certainly the poor to pay the bill for those wars and the military presence in general. And again, it made no nations out there self-determining. The only nation that's really become self-determining in some sense is China. And the reason why is because although they believe in communism as an ideology and they have a more socialistic view of government and things, they actually are very nationalist in their impulse. And so they practice globalism. They are a participant in this global economy and structure, but they do it from a very nationalist and ethno-national framework. So again, I'll open up by saying the post-World War II democratic liberal order has failed. It will continue to fail. Donald Trump is the only candidate in this race, and maybe since John F. Kennedy, that threatens to change that world order and that status quo.
Okay, cool. This is meant to be only about the economy and the policies of the two, but we will kick it into that now. So, Royce, if you want to kick it off, man, you can do a bit of cross-examination about the economic policies of the two candidates.
Well, I mean, I think first of all, I'll say that I think the America First policy approach is prudent. It's not extreme at all. And to my point about China, look, you can't have it both ways. You can't say that tariffs aren't a proper way to go about bringing value back to the American working class, or that the manufacturing base is okay if it's there in China, and we have to protect the environment here, which is what a lot of people on the left have claimed is. Us losing our manufacturing base first to the fourth industrial revolution is just an inevitability. And secondly, if we lose it to China, it's because they deserve to have their day as the world superpower or as a developing nation. When you can cross-reference it with their climate rhetoric, and I'm going to do a lot of cross-referencing, because part of the problem with the political discourse is we stay in one lane, but the conversation on this side actually contradicts this lane. To back up a bit, I forgot to mention this piece. You could make the claim that the post-World War II Democrat liberal order is the best system that we have, that it's the best that we've seen from an economic standpoint, because of the overall net wealth or prosperity or technological advancement that has brought people all around the world. But if you make that claim that it's the best we have, then you immediately lose the climate narrative. You lose the narrative about capitalism, let's say. You lose the narrative about male-dominated patriarchies. You lose the narrative about gender theory. You lose a bunch of the narratives that have become the linchpin of the left's political platform, right? Because so far as I know, number one, the international rules-based order in this post-World War II Democrat liberal order economically have been largely based on the energy as oil market. Anybody who tells you anything different is lying to you. In fact, that's what Henry Kissinger did when he tied the screws down on the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. It was based on the petrodollar. In large part, it still is based on the petrodollar. And I say that because that's the best that we've done so far in terms of energy is oil. So if the climate narrative challenges that, and we say that the best we have is what we should go with because it's the best we have, then we can't change from oil. We can't change from capitalism because that's brought the best we've seen. We can't change from a two-gender sort of a social and sexual reproductive philosophy, because that has been the greatest net success in human history in terms of reproduction and the wealth and prosperity that many nations enjoy now. So a lot of the narratives go out of the window if you say, well, this international rules-based order is the best we had. I don't agree it's the best we had. Economically speaking, the dollar, the world order that Kamala Harris is defending has taken the dollar since the inception of the Federal Reserve and decreased the purchasing power of the dollar incrementally until now it's but a mere fraction of what it was before. And the problem with the one thing that I will say is that if there's one criticism of the free market and capitalism, is that we actually don't practice free market capitalism.
Okay,
Over time,
Mason, a lot to
ahead.
cover there, man. What are you?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jake. I was locked in a lecture there of a certain monologue. I think
We
it's
will try and
interesting
keep
that
it a little
we're
bit more free flowing from now on.
yeah, I find it interesting that we're having a conversation about economic policy, and we just had to listen to a monologue kind of interweaving this narrative about history. But that's typically what happens with a lot of very strong Trump loyalists, is moving away from the top conversation about policy and specifically how we can do this, and really
We'll
move
just
into
have
like,
Mason
how
finish
can we
off the
create
point.
this
Wait a
narrative?
second. Wait a second. Hang
So,
on. Hang on.
So what's I think is really important to bring up
hold on,
right
wait a
now.
Hold on, guys. Both of you. Mason,
The
we'll just have you
entire-
finish up the
Okay,
point,
go
and
ahead.
then Royce jump in after.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, going back into actually talking about policy and getting into the nitty gritty, I could come here and weave a narrative about how Kamala Harris is actually, I could evoke identity politics or a victim narrative, whatever I want to do. I'm just really going to go into specific policy proposals. So Kamala Harris has proposed a tax plan specifically for 100 million low and middle class workers. This would cost around $2.4 trillion, which are projections that she's actually giving. This is going to be the cost of my plan. How am I going to pay for this plan? It's going to be a $1.3 trillion tax increase specifically for corporate taxes, which previously had been paying nothing. Again, going back to me and Royce's agreement that we should prioritize the workers of this country, not necessarily corporations. I think what he was getting into at the end of his monologue there is crony capitalism, which I assume he would say are corporate interests that really utilize government officials in order to do their bidding and increase their own wealth. And I would be in complete agreement with that, which is why I think a tax plan like this, which really prioritizes workers, would be a better alternative than the Donald Trump, which is increasing those corporate interests to the maximum ability. I also think that it's important to have the $300 to $400 billion that Kamala Harris's presidency would allow for Medicare to renegotiate the costs of private pharmaceutical drugs. That's something that I think is essential. If we want strong workers that are able to build a strong nation, we need to empower them with the ability to take care of themselves, take care of their health, not rely on last minute resort medical care, but instead have that preventative care, which can't really be done if pharmaceutical costs are so high that people don't see that as an option for their lives. Again, restoring the expanded the child tax credit is really important, especially for newer families up to $6,000. That is so much money that we could be giving to people who are trying to start their families, who have a lot of economic uncertainty and don't really know how to navigate a system right now that really is pricing them out. Me and Royce can have a debate on what exactly is causing a lot of those price increases. I assume he would say it is too much government spending or this and that. We'll get into that. I don't want to put words in your mouth. But I would say that a lot of that is inflationary costs that came from the pandemic, the same way that I wouldn't blame Donald Trump for ending his presidency with record low job creation, record unemployment rates, very high inflation costs. I wouldn't say that's Donald Trump's fault. Donald Trump had to deal with a worldwide pandemic that many other world leaders also had to deal with around March of 2020. And that's something that we can't really say, oh, shame on you, Donald Trump, for ending because of the symptoms of a lot of those worldwide issues that everybody had to face. And the same way, I wouldn't blame the Biden and Harris administration for having to deal with the offset or the actual repercussions of a particular pandemic like that. But I do think that our growth is something that's significant and worth talking about. From the G7 countries, we had the strongest recovery period where we were able to gain a lot of those manufacturing jobs back, around 800,000 manufacturing jobs, which I think should be commendable. And maybe we can disagree, me and Royce, on exactly how much credit we should give the Biden administration for that.
All right, Royce.
Okay. I don't know if I'm not free flowing enough, but what tends to happen with a lot of these young people, particularly young liberals who who support Kamala Harris or this Democrat platform and some of these talking points is they want to obscure the history, right? Because if you tie down the history, then you start to see very clearly who has represented certain interests and who will continue to represent certain interests definitively. Definitively, Kamala Harris, my opponent, Amy Klobuchar, Joe Biden, a number of Republicans as well, Dick Cheney, Liz Cheney, Mitt Romney, Mitch McConnell, all of them look to preserve this world order. And it's not fiction, it's not conjecture, it's not a conspiracy theory, it's right there up in your face. And they're very open and almost braggadocious about trying to defend it. And it, first of all, first and foremost, I don't know if it's not economic specific enough, but the cornerstone, the sort of bedrock of the entire geopolitical ideology we live under is economic in nature. The United States dollar as the world's reserve currency is the global hegemony, the global economic hegemony. So I don't know if that's too obscure or, you know, too historical. It's not really that historical. I mean, the United States dollar has only been the reserve currency since after World War II. You're looking about a 70-year window. I mean, we can't talk about the American politics in terms of 70-year windows or increments, or even 30-year or 20-year increments or windows. It's easy to see why so many liberals or Kamala Harris supporters have lost sight completely of how we got here. We got here because this uniparty in this country, the DC elite, who do benefit the corporations or are controlled by the corporations and special interests, they've been serving that interest. They've been serving that agenda for a very long time. Some of them even still alive. Some of them the heir of their parents' work, like Mika Brzezinski, for example. And she is the mouthpiece of the entire agenda. And her father was the architect. Zbigniew Brzezinski was the architect of the post-World War II democratic liberal order. So, and the problem with it economically is this: when you're a country that only makes fake money, and you protect that fake money by causing wars or fighting wars or posturing on people militarily, and your national mortal enemy, your economic trade war enemy, the Chinese, are the manufacturing superpower, there's no place for the American people to go but into debt. And that's what the post-World War II democratic liberal order really has created. It can only deliver the American people death and debt, and that is expanded to the entire world economy, which is why we have $4 quadrillion in global bank debt. And people will continue to lose net worth, equity, the ability to own things. And for some liberals, that's not important. Private ownership is not a big deal. But we will face that in the near future. So.
Okay, so Mason, he's talking more about the big picture here, the United States' role as the global reserve currency. How would you respond to that in terms of this current election? Who's going to be the better candidate?
Yeah, I specifically want to go into policy. I mean, I thought this was a talking about what a presidency is going to look like once they get enacted. And it's important to recognize
foreign policy.
Right. Are we in the Royce episode right now, or is this supposed to be like a
I think actually
we're able to
foreign policy? It's foreign policy. It's economic and monetary policy.
Royce, I've been able to let you talk. You've gone on your monologues. I've not interrupted you once. I'd appreciate if I was owed that same respect. But thank you so much.
I like interrupting people who lie and are dishonest. That's just me though.
What was I lying and being dishonest about? We could talk about
right there. Wait, I'll tell you. No, wait, I'll tell you. You're saying I'll tell you for sure. I'm very good at that. You just tried to infer that we're not talking about policy when we talk.
We're not. About you're going about these monologues about the new global
the United States
order.
dollar is the beating heart of American foreign policy and monetary policy.
I have a question for you, Royce. If you don't,
you live in the United States of the Federal Reserve. Like, Royce, I don't know.
What were the accomplishments of Donald Trump when he came in? You're saying that this is somebody who's made peace through strength. This is somebody who's challenged the global order.
I didn't say that. I didn't say he made peace through strength. No, I didn't say that. I said that was the said goal of the post-World War II democrat liberal order initially, and it was a lie. That's not what we did.
So you think Donald Trump wants to remove military spending? Because that's the idea of peace through strength, is making sure we have a robust military apparatus to challenge.
I think when Donald Trump threatens to pull out of NATO, and when Donald Trump says that we shouldn't be fighting in certain wars, or we should be trying to get out of certain wars, or we didn't get any new wars during his presidency, I think he's making a very clear and concise statement about how he feels regarding military spending.
Look, gentlemen, we will get onto foreign policy very soon. I do want to keep it. I know it does pertain to the economy in some way, obviously. Foreign
No, but
wars.
Jake, wait a second, Jake. Let me be clear here. There is no economic, we could talk about tax cuts and child tax credits and we could try and play this obscure, shell game about
What is
I
the
don't
shell
know
game
which
when these
the
policies have
shell game is
actual
the shell
effects on
game
the
is
families in America? And
since
this is
World
what
War
this
II,
is
we
what I
have
have a
sent
problem with
manufacturing
Republicans.
jobs out of our country.
Guys, hold on a second. So
It's
obviously, Mason,
it's
do you want to
economic
respond to the
policy.
point? Do you want to respond to the point that Royce made about the US dollar as global reserve currency and the liberal world order post World War II and how that's
Yeah,
affected the
we
country
can
and how
talk.
inflation?
Yeah, we
kick
can
on.
absolutely talk about these hypotheticals. The problem is Donald
It's
Trump's
not
not offering an
hypothetical.
alternative. Donald Trump is not offering an alternative. That's the hypothetical. Is you're implying that when Donald Trump, if he is to be elected, he's going to challenge this global world
He already
order or
did.
this. In what way? Give me some
You
concrete
threatened to put
examples of things that he did.
I can do that, but first of all, there's no pressing time factor. We have 2 hours. So if there's something that I've laid out that you need further explanation on, I'm completely willing to do that. But what I'm not willing to do is misinform, disinform, like your side likes to say or claim. When you go back and refute that I'm not talking about policy, when we're talking about global economic policy that governs over how we deal with other countries and how we deal with our own American taxpayers. It absolutely is economic policy.
Donald Trump is not in any unique position where he's coming in as a new leader. We've seen what he looks like when he's in office. He spent 4 years in office. The only things he were able to accomplish, Royce, and this is irrefutable, the only legislative success he had was the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Everything else was through either executive order, which is interesting for small government conservatives who are usually against things like executive orders, and appointed Supreme Court justices, which is a give me for whoever is in power.
What do you mean the only thing he did?
That's the only legislative
you act like
accomplishment
that's not
he had.
significant. But you act like that's not significant.
Then let's talk about it. You're trying to not talk about the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and talk about
you're
these
trying to talk about specific low-hanging fruit. It's not theoretical. It's not theoretical whatsoever. In fact, it's about the most concrete thing we could measure. That's what you're not accepting. We can't even start it's a non-starter. If you want to talk about tax credit as a better example of American policy failure or success of, instead of the United States dollar and our monetary policy over the course of 80 years and the overall trajectory of the power of the dollar.
Royce, I'm not refuting the reality of something what you're talking about. We're talking about Donald Trump specifically. What did he do to challenge what you're referring to? Thank you.
The consensus, the conventional wisdom, the status quo of the post-World War II democratic liberal order has been to defend Europe's territorial integrity, and all of our other national interests where the U.S. dollar is trading. It is a heavy military lift, one that we can no longer service in money or in manpower. That shoe just hasn't dropped yet for us. It's starting to right now, obviously. What Donald Trump challenged was NATO. And despite what people think about it or not, that challenge, even in just in dialogue, actually is the most substantial and significant shift, change, a threat to the status quo that has prevailed over this country since the end of World War II. Now, the only way you can challenge that is if you think since World War II, this country hasn't been on the slow decline or maybe rapid decline, depending on your framework of time, to where we are now. And you just said the corporations are an issue. Well, how did the corporations get there in the first place? This whole when they first put this world order together, there were a bunch of corporate, international corporate businessmen and elites that sat at that table and gave their economic strategists and experts to the group in order to figure out how to structure this thing the exact way it is now. And the fractional reserve bank. See, if you want to talk about what's really making people poor, then you have to talk about fractional reserve banking. You can't talk about child tax credits. And that's what Kamala Harris is unwilling to do. And at least Donald Trump, although I haven't really heard Donald Trump talk about the Federal Reserve, only loosely in certain cases where he
I appreciate it.
Well, but I haven't heard him talk about it except loosely when he criticized specific, things that were going on at specific times. He hasn't really threatened or questioned the overall structure or institution. Our movement, the MAGA movement, and the pressure that will come from underneath him to address things like fractional reserve banking only exists on our side. On the other side, the entire structure they may talk about cultural revolution things like gender theory and race and women's rights and wages, but nobody's talking about abolishing the Fed. In fact, the only person on you guys' side who ever threatened the economic structure really was Cornel West, and you guys kicked him out as soon as he wouldn't bend the knee. Occupy Wall Street was the last movement that actually tried to address the fundamental economic situation for American working class citizens, and you guys shunned him.
So, Royce, just to steelman it for a second. So you're saying that the big problem is obviously the global finance system and the way that, and America's role in the global finance system, and obviously the Fed and fractional reserve banking. And you believe that the MAGA movement could implement some sort of change, and that Donald Trump challenging NATO is challenging that status quo. Yes. Are there any other examples that you want to give quickly of Donald Trump and how he's going to be the better candidate in that particular regard?
For sure. I think that one of the cornerstones of the America First and MAGA movement has been to prioritize American manufacturing. And I think I don't think that you can even have a thriving economy, middle class and working class, without being a strong manufacturing base. You certainly can't defend an empire. Remember, when we made this economic hegemony, we were the world's manufacturing superpower at the time, so we could call the shots because our national mortal enemies on the international stage could not threaten us militarily. So that allowed us to kind of domineer the playing field. But now we've all but given every last bit of our manufacturing to our national mortal enemy. And Donald Trump is certainly. And so when we say we're going to put tariffs, look, how do you think you're going to start to reel in corporations from trading? Or this is what I don't understand about these Marxist kind of, economic activists and the liberal. How do you think you're going to start to reel in corporations from giving away every last drop of value and price gouging the American people if they can always go to another country who doesn't share our American values about the workplace, let's say, or the age restrictions on labor? How do you think you're going to ever be able to reel these corporations in if they can always go to the Congo and pay some Congolese warlord or despot to get labor for pennies on the dollar? You have to have tariffs. You have. All right,
gents, we're going to move it on next shortly to the border. Mason, I want to give you the last word on this. Is there any closing statement on the economy?
Yeah, I like how Royce, we got to some concrete policy at the end there. A lot of it, again, was that narrative weaving, and I don't want to offend, I don't want to trigger you, Royce, but a lot of that, again, is going over these big narratives instead of really going into policy, because it's difficult to defend Donald Trump's economic agenda. I mean, again, there was the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Royce is saying that was something that he said was a major accomplishment. It was incredibly skewed towards rich people. And if Royce is really worried about the overall concentration of wealth, specifically taking out of that of families that are struggling in the United States, why would you celebrate the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act? I mean, households with incomes in the top 1% would receive an average tax cut of more than $60,000 in 2025, compared to the average tax cut of less than $500 for households in the bottom.
I'll answer the question.
We'll get a quick answer and then we'll move on to the border.
How can I defend?
Wait. We didn't even get to talk about the tariffs, though. He finally said at the end there.
You asked me a question there.
I didn't.
What would you like to address, Mason?
No, in there you asked me a question.
Tariffs?
Yeah, the tariffs specifically. I think that is inflationary, like bar none. Like that's something that is going to be passed on to the American consumer. I do agree with Royce that U.S. manufacturing needs to increase. That's one of the only ways that we can have a self-sufficient economy without relying on exploitation of poorer people in other countries. I think that we'd probably come to agreement that we shouldn't be paying people fractions of what we're paying in the United States just because it's cheaper and it might help the American consumer. But one of the best ways to increase manufacturing in the United States isn't to pressure other countries who are just going to offload that to the corporations that are buying those products in the end of the day. It is going to be investing in certain industries so that way we can have that economic growth here in the U.S. So with things like the Chips and Science Act, where we're actually using federal investment to make sure that we are having manufacturers move to the United States and stay in the United States. That's one of the only ways where we can not only pass on prices to the consumers, which would happen with tariffs, but we can also make sure that we do get that manufacturing back here in the U.S.
I can answer the question.
Please, Royce. It's an important one, the tariffs.
Yeah, well, it's not before the tariffs. The question was about the tax credits, and if we're giving tax breaks to the wealthy in this country, how does that help the working class and middle class? And this is specific to the Black community. I don't mean to play identity politics, but part of what happened to the Black community economically was one, we put an age limit on jobs, okay, and we made jobs heavily required on certain educational requirements or credentials, and on top of sending the manufacturing away writ large. And so one of the ways that Americans can actually have some economic and social mobility is to have access to certain jobs, certain types of jobs that don't require, education they can't afford, really, or any other type of special technical skills. They have to work those jobs and learn that skill on the job, and then be able to move up based on their hard work, their determination, their commitment, their learning of the skills on the job, and so on and so forth. And so when we put pressure on the corporations through taxes, not only the taxes on them personally, but the taxes on the business, they will ultimately try and move more and more of that business offshore. And that's what we saw. This was the justification to send the labor away in the first place. The corporation said that the unions, the Teamsters at the time, but the unions in general, the unions put so much pressure on the corporation, and they were allowed to put so much pressure on the corporation that the corporation could say, we got to go get our toasters and our TVs and VCRs from Japan. We got to go get our tires or rubber from China. We got to go get whatever it is from the Congo. So when you actually give tax, and I don't think Donald Trump was finished. That's my point. I think Donald Trump started off by prioritizing American business and manufacturing, which is why he told the Apple CEO at the time, Tim Cook, that the only way he was going to give them a waiver to reorient the way that they were being taxed was if he started to manufacture in America. And he actually did. He built an Apple plant there in Texas. There needs to be many more. But Donald Trump was just getting started. But let's not pretend that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and the entire Democrat Party as a movement aren't head over heels for China being the new global, the new center of the global economy. They love it. They can say what they want. They can play semantics all they want to, but they love the idea of China being the center of the economy. And I can go all the way back and pull footage of George Soros himself. And don't forget, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, Amy Klobuchar, they all go and they kiss the ring of little baby Soros, little Alex. Okay, they're taking pictures with him. He's this big celebrity in their crew. And I can go and pull footage of his dad saying the United States dollar has to decrease in value so that China, a much smaller economy, but much more efficient economy for the world agenda that we want to bring. It's in his own words. So it's not weaving a narrative of conspiracy. These people said it. They're heavily influential.
Keep going.
They're heavily influential. They donate money to the campaign, specifically Kamala Harris. These people want to see a decline in the dollar. That will cause a decline in cost of, standard of living, quality of life, and cost of real wages in our country for American citizens.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to move on now. We've gone almost double the time that we should have on the economy. We're going to move to the board a bit quickly. I'm going to read out some super chats that we've got here. Siege D says, hey, Jake, would you be interested in collaborating with Glenn Lawrence? He's well-versed in the red pill and promotes biblical patriarchy. Also, he has a few Australian followers who enjoy your content too. I saw this before we started. I went and followed him on Twitter, so would be definitely open to it. Tiki Tack says, what's wrong with you grifters? Do I need to call the IRS? I don't know. What do we reckon, gentlemen? Are we grifters? Cascade says, how can Kamala represent USA as president when she requires teleprompters, repeats confusing word salads, and cackles through important issues? Mason, maybe kick that one to you.
Yeah, again, I'm not somebody who is head over heels for Kamala Harris. I think that is an easier presidency for my organizing priorities. I would throw it back to, again, in a two-party system, if we're given two choices, there's going to be two people that have a lot of flaws, and we're going to have to choose one in order for them to be the executive. I think that Kamala Harris does struggle oftentimes, especially in confrontational situations with formulating sentences. I mean, one of her big campaigns, they flipped it on the coconut quote, right? Like, you fell out of a coconut tree, something that was nonsensical that turned into a meme. I also think you could say the same thing about Donald Trump, saying that we should inject bleach to prevent against COVID. I don't think that Donald Trump actually was proposing that as a policy. Some would call that a joke, but these are indications that everything that a politician does is going to be under heavy scrutiny. And I think it's interesting to make sure that we take them on a policy perspective instead of just their day-to-day, everyday interactions.
Yep. Drunken Batman says, showing support for the channel. Thank you, Drunken Batman. I appreciate that. And Bill Trench Dog Davey says, Jake, ask him why we should give Kamala Harris a chance when she's done nothing but hide for 4 years and allowed Joe Biden to stumble and bumble. Mason?
Yeah, I mean, Kamala Harris has been somebody that has been the tie-breaking vote for historic legislation. Again, these are things like the Chips and Science Acts, the Inflation Reduction Act. This is bipartisan legislation that under Biden, they were able to codify. I find it interesting that a lot of Republicans like to say that Biden is this bumbling fool, which very clearly he's somebody who struggles to have coherent sentences. But at the end of the day, it's interesting when somebody who struggles to talk for extended times on end is passing more legislation than Donald Trump, the person that they are advocating in favor of to be the executive. Again, one piece of legislation he was able to get in 4 years, and Biden, who's this bumbling fool, was able to pass that much more legislation than Donald Trump. I find that interesting.
Royce, do you have a response to that super chat?
Yeah, I mean, I have a response to everything, but that's just me. My response is to try and, to assume that somebody's ability to pass legislation through is a symbol of their integrity in this political climate that we live in is absolutely ridiculous. It's almost as if we're not going to acknowledge that omnibus legislation in and of itself is one of the main issues there in DC. And even furthermore, I'll be honest, you can talk about Republicans, bills that Republicans have supported or Democrats or bipartisanship. I've said the word uniparty before. A lot of people think that it's a conspiracy theory. I don't see how. It used to be, like when I was growing up, it used to be a given, let's say in my neighborhood, that we all agreed Republicans and Democrats worked underneath the table and behind closed doors to the net, let's say, detriment of the American people. So I don't think there's 10, I can't count 10 America First senators in the entire United States Senate. So of course Joe Biden is able to get more legislation through than Donald Trump. Donald Trump has just as many enemies in the Republican Party as he does in the Democrat Party. And I think that speaks volumes of who he is, or at least what he's capable of doing. If you want to threaten the underlying structure of corruption that is DC and their special interests and lobby money, Donald Trump is by far the only choice. Because everybody else seems to be able to streamline legislation through like it's Christmas. And that's not what we should be doing. Number one, I disagree with the legislation of omnibuses on a structural and fundamental standpoint. But also you can tell from that, from how legislation is passed, that people like Joe Biden, whether they be Democrat or Republican, seem to have a lot of success in cutting deals, whether they're good for the American people or not. And a lot of times they're not.
Now, gentlemen, one of the most important issues of this coming election is obviously the border. It's come up a lot in the recent VP and presidential debates. I think that the border, what are they called? The border people who endorsed Trump at the election?
Border Patrol.
Border Patrol. They endorsed Trump. Hot issue. So we're going to kick it over to Roy for the first opening statement on this one.
Well, I had the last one. Go ahead, Mason. You go ahead and do it. So
I find that we'll probably be walking around a lot in circles with this conversation. I'm somebody who disagrees with both Kamala Harris's platform as well as Donald Trump for how to handle immigration at the southern border. I think what's more important is recognizing the historical context of why we're getting an influx of people who want to come into the country. And a lot of that's because of U.S. foreign policy that destabilizes regimes because we are involved in places where we shouldn't be. So, Royce, we might have some agreement there.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah. But for me, the solutions to what causes a lot of those people to want to come here will probably differ on where I think that you would probably want a stronger border. I mean, if you're in support of Donald Trump, things like family separations, things like removing people from the country, that's not something that I'm in agreement with. I think what's more important is figuring out who these people are, increasing the vetting process by increasing the pathways to citizenship. So that way people can be productive members of the country. I don't know if we're going to have disagreements when it comes to cultural hegemony and making sure that we have specific assimilation processes so that way people will share the same sort of cultural values of the US. I typically don't like to buy a lot of those narratives. I think that people that are coming here are wanting a better life for themselves and their families. And while some people might commit crime, If we look at, the
ya.
FBI statistics, we can see that natural born citizens are much more likely to commit crime than people that are coming from other countries. So I don't think that we should deport natural born citizens. I think instead we should just be able to vet people more appropriately, and increasing pathways of citizenship is not only are we going to know who these people are and what their motivations for coming to the US are in the first place, but they can still contribute towards growing businesses, towards our economic growth, and making sure that America remains a strong capitalist country. If you are a capitalist,
Mason,
sorry.
Yeah, just quickly. So you neither of the two candidates appeal to you in terms of their border policy?
No, Kamala Harris has adopted a lot of Trump era policies besides like removing families and family separations, but she has wanted to increase things that are similar to Title 42. I mean, that was enacted under the pandemic, which was the justification for just having very strong militaristic control of the border. But I don't think Kamala would be able to do that through the same legal means. She has just talked about being very staunch when it comes to deporting people and removing folks that shouldn't be in this country or haven't come through the legal process. And for me, I think it's much more important to recognize if people are coming over here, they're doing so oftentimes risking their lives. Oftentimes they're paying people that are involved in cartels or people in very dangerous industries. And so by removing that, by making this pathway to citizenship easier, we're kind of going to gut a lot of the incentives that a lot of these bad actors have for funneling people into the country.
Okay, Royce?
Well, first, I just want to ask how old you are. I just want to ask that. And so
how old did you think, Royce?
Maybe you probably in college, maybe just after college, 24, 25, maybe.
I'm 25. Yeah, good guess.
Okay. I have a lot of optimism and hope for your generation and for people just like you. I'm not much older than you. I'm 33, but I'm an old soul. I only hang with boomers for the most part. So I'm kind of ossified in that way. But I have a lot of hope for you all because I don't say this to be condescending. I really don't. I want you to take that, in earnest. The reason I go back and talk about history so often is because a lot of these narratives that have been built where we can do talking points kind of off the cuff and get down to very policy specific issues. The people who kind of gave birth or gave life to that entire political worldview did believe in this history. And in fact, some of them created that history. Okay. And so one of the narratives about this entire, and I spoke to this in the opening statement, one of the narratives is that white men, white supremacy, Nazism, nationalism, racism, it's been a scourge on the planet. Does it have some historical context? Obviously, we know racism has been around for a long time, classism as well. We get that that's a reality in world history. However, it is so bizarre to me that an entire movement, an entire political movement in this country, such as the one that wants to hold Kamala Harris up and openly now, not theoretically, hypothetically, openly and very specifically holds Kamala Harris up on an identity politic basis and says, Black girl magic, we want to have the first Black woman president. Why? They're hearkening back to this history all around the world where white people have mistreated and taken advantage and exploited other races, people who weren't as fortunate or whatever, however they want to parse it. It's so crazy to me that political movement is so invested in upholding the very economic and political structure that they say has caused all the problems. Let's take colonialism or neocolonialism, for example. If there's one thing you could say about the international rules-based order or NATO, it's that its main focus is the territorial integrity of Europe. How can you say that white people in a Eurocentric culture and economy are the problem, and they're trying to keep Kamala Harris down, and Black men who don't vote for are only doing it because we've picked up the misogynistic traits of, I don't know, our Republican white leaders? And then you turn around and say, we're going to fight for the territorial integrity of Europe all the way to a nuclear war. Now, why do I bring this up? I don't mean to be, off on a tangent, but I'm trying to say or highlight here. The reason why we have mass migration in the first place is because we went to a globalized economy. The reason why we have mass migration in the first place is because we believe that entangling everybody's markets would be a deterrent to war. And as such, later on, academics justified the despot and warlord torn economies in other places in the world and the mass migration it caused. And I love when Giorgia Meloni in Italy, she was more nationalist when she got in. Now she might be wavering a little bit. Maybe they got to her. I don't know. I liked her though but she said it perfectly. She said the problem in Burkina Faso isn't the Burkina Faso. There's not something inherently wrong with the people or their economy. The problem is the French are still exploiting them for pennies on the dollar, and America's doing the same thing. And Kamala and Joe Biden and all of them, when they say we're going to preserve the rules-based order, the bedrock of the rules-based order is the same globalized economy and exploitation that got us here in the first place. So no, we don't need South Americans coming across our border in an open border world. What we need to do, what we said we were going to do, is go there by peace through strength and make them self-determining. And we act like we just could. The most racist thing you could say is that we couldn't make these nations and their people self-determining because they just didn't have the IQ. Like they were, the people in Africa or South America just weren't smart enough to have a modern economy or society. That's not true at all. We intentionally put a ceiling on their ability to develop into a modern nation. Why? Because we liked them dependent on our military and our taxpayers, because that gave us the justification to steal from our own people. And that's the scam that we've been running. Burkina Faso could become a modern civilization. The countries in South America could become, we like socialists there. We like despots there. We like warlords in charge who exploit the people and proliferate crime for their own profit and gain. We like that. Liberals
so it's interesting,
like that.
fellas. It seems like you guys are kind of, at least in one regard, coming at it from a sort of a similar vantage point, where you're saying that it's American foreign policy in one way or another that's actually caused this migration crisis. But in terms of the solutions moving forward, who would you say actually has the better? Because I know, Mason, you said you're a bit on the fence about it. Royce, you're obviously more in the Trump camp for this one. Mason, who do you think has the better policies, and what do you think they are?
I mean, I think that both policies essentially are advocated for different forms of harm, right? So like, even if we can make it as explicit as possible, I don't know what the TOS on the platforms that you're having is, but if two candidates were proposing, I want to kill 500 people, the other candidate was saying, I want to kill 1,000 people. On principle, I'm going to disagree with both of them. I think both are wrong. I don't think that we should justify or give reason to either of those policies, but one of them certainly is going to decrease the amount of harm that they're doing. So in that way, I guess I have to see that I would choose Kamala Harris over this. Again, it's not something that I agree with. I think it's interesting in Royce's interpretation of what the cause is, because I think that we probably would agree on a lot. And then at the same time, somebody who wants to remove from the global economy, somebody who wants to strengthen the United States, wants to increase the costs that are coming towards the United States. And this isn't even just talking about tariffs, but specifically on immigration. Not only are you wanting to decrease the labor pool, which is just an anti-capitalist take, like in its regard. Yet that is true. That is true.
No,
you know how many immigrants are increasing towards our
true at all.
economic production and growth?
Not true at all.
Absolutely. That is one thing that you're wanting to decrease.
Talking point.
All right, if I can talk. Jake, what do you think about this?
So
yeah, not only do you want to
this is an interesting point of disagreement, because you guys are now talking about the labor force, and Mason, you're saying that it's a positive thing for the labor force of America to have migrants, to have illegal immigrants.
Was it Jake? Was it the Roman Empire, Jake?
It's not having undocumented immigrants. I think the way that to strengthen that is to make sure that we get documentation for these people. Not only can they be employees of businesses and provide for their families and the United States in general, but then two, we're able to tax them at the same rate that we're taxing everyday Americans. One of the biggest complaints I hear is that immigrants don't pay taxes, which is just one, untrue because of sales taxes, but two, if you want to also give them income taxes as well, only way you can do that is with proper documentation. So it's just nonsensical to me to say that, one, we want to make sure that we're decreasing our labor pool, which Royce could disagree or say that he doesn't want to do. But at the other end, the costs of actually deporting these folks are immensely high. Like not only do we have to identify specifically, we have to pay law enforcement to be going door to door. I don't know how Donald Trump has not proposed his actual solution to getting the deportations that he wants, but he's saying we're going to have the largest deportation ports in American history. And for me, I don't think he understands what that costs taxpayers at the end of the day. At the same time, spending on immigration enforcement has skyrocketed, and the number of undocumented immigrants in the United States has roughly tripled from 3.5 million.
I'm going to kick it to you in just a second, Royce. But Mason, it does sound like you do agree quite a lot with the Democrats in terms of their own vision of the country and in terms of having mass immigration for the labor force. So it would appear as though you're leaning much more towards the Democrats' policy.
No, Kamala Harris has said she's completely shifted to the right when it comes to how she wants to handle people wanting to migrate to this country. That's something that has changed. And Royce could shake his head or he could say it's not true, but that's what Kamala Harris has said. She wants to increase Border Patrol spending. She wants to make sure that we are decreasing the amount of people that are coming in here. So that is not the Democratic policy, is wanting to increase the pathway to citizenship.
Yeah. All right, let's kick it to Royce. Royce, what do you think? It's particularly about the labor force, the demographic collapse that's happening in the United States. Is this a positive thing?
First of all, I thought, no, I'm not even going to talk. Let me go here first. First of all, I thought we were talking in earnest. If we're going to talk about Kamala Harris shifting to the right for what is the groundswell of momentum in the country of working class Americans and working class and middle class Americans who see the border as one of their number one issues, and her switching her rhetoric when she was already in the office and she was at least put in charge of the border or commissioned to address root causes, and she did an abysmal job with that, as many people have pointed out, even on CNN, which are not, particularly inclined to do MAGA or Donald Trump any favors. They just had to do it on the basis of journalistic integrity alone. Let's not even talk about Kamala Harris's border rhetoric, and that's just ridiculous. Let's go back to the point of what the cost is going to be. Jerome Powell, who, if somebody's as integrated into the money scam, it's any of the chairs of the Federal Reserve. Okay, now Jerome Powell himself said that illegal immigration is causing or is increasing the inflation in this country. That's not me saying it, that's him. Now, I take it with a grain of salt just in how much distrust I have of the Fed and any of their chairs, okay? But I will say this, the cost, when we talk about cost for the American citizens, this is why I say we don't want to weave the narratives. No, it's one world, right? Like with climate change, we say that China's pollution doesn't affect the one world the same way America's does. Dishonest. I mean, disingenuous on face value. So it's one world. You kind of have to weave these things in to get a good holistic look at what we're talking about or proposing. The cost for American citizens to be in wars that never end is significant. The reason we're in wars that never end is because we're in copious amounts of debt in a country that doesn't make anything, or at least it doesn't make things more than it makes war or wants war. So you certainly can't have a country with no border that has undocumented illegals coming into it or flowing over it when you don't make anything. And as many people that are coming into the labor market, they're not coming in to make our manufacturing base any stronger. That hasn't been the place where we've dropped them off, because that's not what we want. We want illegal immigrants to come into this country, and the Republicans are just as guilty as this. And here's another lie that we're telling everybody, that we don't have Americans that will work these jobs. That's not true. The American people are tired of being price gouged by these corporate elitists and these politicians who work together and co-conspire to play some game about minimum wage and inflation. And all the while, we know they're scamming us. We're $37 trillion in debt. The Social Security is going to run out. We know we're getting scammed economically. But they play these little word games to go away from the real issue. The real issue is your country can only hold so many people. And even if it's not about the geographical space that people that can hold it, the physical people, your systems and institutions can only feasibly service so many people. Like in the pandemic, for example, when the hospitals were all
Jake, are we able to just ask questions so we can prevent this like monologue to monologue? Like, can we have maybe monologue. Like it would be good to like make it a debate.
Yeah, okay, Royce, kick it to a question or a cross analysis if you've got it.
Yeah, okay. So Royce, I have a quick. Oh, Royce asking the question. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Mason, you can ask a question. Go for it.
Yeah. I'm just curious on like what's your solution, Royce? What do you want to do?
Close the border.
You can sum it up in 2 points. Close the border. So no immigration, right?
No, we can have legal immigration.
Okay,
but like Obama said back in 2009, like I would go back to Obama's 2009 rhetoric on the border. Yeah, we should have legal immigration, but the people who cross over the border should be sent back to where they came from, and they should be put to the back of the line for the citizen in Mexico City who applies legally with the embassy or with his own government, and they have to go to the back of the line, not let them come here and try and assimilate them and just, you know, act and not, we can't even say they're illegal.
So if there was a bill on the table that would do just that, make the border much more strict, increase
Stop it.
border
Don't
patrol,
start that. Yeah, we would love
be
to,
on board
we
with
would
that?
love to do it if it didn't include Ukraine spending.
Okay, so it's not a priority, is what you're trying to say.
No.
That's what democracy is, Royce, and you understand that. You understand that, Royce, is you have to build a coalition
for the
of people.
omnibuses. No,
I'm
you're
not
shilling for
shilling.
omnibuses. Yes,
No.
you are.
This is something that I disagree with. The bipartisan bill that was proposed by Biden is something I disagree with. It makes it harder for asylum and it increases.
You're disagreeing with for the wrong reasons. The sole reason
it's for humanitarian causes. But for you, somebody saying that you prioritize is making sure that
not for humanitarian causes.
You should be in favor of implementing policy that gets there. But like a Donald Trump supporter, I don't know why I'd expect somebody who's a Donald Trump supporter to be a pro legislation, because you had one of the least successful legislative presidents in modern American history.
Yeah, I know you guys think that legislation being passed, no matter the net outcome, is a positive. I know, I understand that. That's a fixture of the DC swamp. That's a fixture of the DC swamp.
So how many people did Trump like hire and then fire again? Is that somebody who's willing to drain the swamp, or is that somebody who's going to be tricked by the swamp in order to get them? All I need
to reference is that the entire swamp has marshaled all their resources against them. But back to your point, because you want to try and get to this obscure conversation about Donald Trump. I don't even want to talk about Donald Trump, really. I already said everything I need to say about him. Now I just want to talk about your frame of reference when it comes to these policies and the root issues. Like, you know how Kamala Harris was commissioned to address root issues across the border? She didn't do it because she didn't have that frame of reference, that historical gravitas. My point to you is, we're not trying to address the humanitarian crisis. We're given a justification for white liberals as to why we want to continue to cause it. And that's the distinguishable difference in your perspective on this. You seem to think when we let all these illegal immigrants come across our border, that's our humanitarian altruism. No, it's not. That's just our scapegoat and justification to keep stealing their natural resources where they came from. And if you can't see that, then you don't understand crony capitalism. You can't talk about corporate greed, because the apples of the world will look the other way on illegal immigration, give you some justification that it's helping the labor market, while they go take cobalt from the Congo from some 7-year-old African kid who has to go down into the mine and pull the cobalt out of the side of the mountain until his finger bleeds. His fingers are bleeding, and he has no protections. So what about his humanity? What about his humanity? What about his dignity? We don't care about that, right? Because you still need your iPhone, right? So how deep do you want to go in this is my point. You can't set the bar of the humanitarianism conveniently wherever you want to. If we're going to address the humanitarian implications morally and ethically, then let's go and do that. But don't act like letting illegal immigrants come here is doing anything other than hurting the American working class and taxpayer, while we still go and do the same drugs, slavery, piracy model that we've been doing since the days of the British Empire.
If you want to more strongly regulate, Royce, what our specific actions are in foreign countries, that's going to be something I'm in full favor of. And that's why I find it interesting that you're voting for someone like Donald Trump, who's empowering these corporations to continue to do that. Like, you're right in identifying problems that we have and a lot of the exploitation we have, especially amongst developing nations. I want to hear what the solutions are. And this is the typical speak that we hear from politicians that don't give the solutions on what to stop that. Or you're advocating for somebody. If this is a conversation about these issues in particular, I'd love to keep talking about that. But I thought this was an election debate. And if you're saying that Donald Trump's going to be a good alternative to that,
you want to shrink the election, and this is a common thing on your side. And it's not even about Republicans or Democrats or conservatives or liberals or MAGA and the far left or the BLMs and Marxists. It's not even about that. This is just about talking about issues at the most fundamental basis, and whether or not people are even really interested in that. People have been given a sort of a short menu, a sort of bar menu of politics with French fries. And let's talk about the tax credit. Now that's going to be the issue. It's just like Roe v. Wade. Now Roe v. Wade is going to be the single issue. It's like, okay, maybe, but and you certainly can choose that as an American citizen. But if you want somebody who actually understands these issues sort of fundamentally, systemically, like we talk about, then we have to go and talk about them in that fashion. So I don't know what the aversion is to talking about these issues at that holistic level. I thought we had one world that we were trying to live in together as global citizens. I can give you a ton of solutions. Close the border. Because if you believe that America has a role in upholding freedom and democracy all around the world, then that would mean America's oh, you don't believe that? Then you can't vote for Kamala Harris. Then you just can't vote for her. There's no way to vote for. What do you mean? What do I mean?
I stated this at the beginning of this talk, Royce, is that I believe in harm reduction. So my organizing goals are most important. What does that even mean?
Tell me what that means.
Utilitarianism.
Harm reduction means that I have two options with people who are going to be the executive of the country. And if I have to explain these arguments to you, then I can go ahead and do that.
How do you quantify harm?
See, the word harm is a very vague, like workers' rights, for things like unions. I think that someone like a Donald Trump is going to... As soon as I get to actual problems and actual policy,
as soon as you start,
I know that's difficult for you to talk about.
Keep going. No. As soon as you start to go on specific things that only you get to determine, you have now taken the sort of democratic purview out of the discussion. Like, oh, here are the things that are most harmful to me, and that's another sort of moral relativism that you guys do.
No, the goal, Royce, all of politics is a power struggle. That's what it is at the end of the day.
I know that's what the Marxists think. I know
it's not the Marxists. What do you mean?
That's what the postmodern and the Marxists think.
These are conflicting interests. Everybody's going to have different priorities.
But you guys are voting for the power.
If we're prioritizing people that are working class,
you're voting for the power. You shield for the intelligence community. And this whole little passive aggressive thing you're doing now, where the liberals are trying to say, you know, we don't really like either candidate, but we'll take the lesser of two evils. It's the same thing.
Liberals are not doing that. Liberals are not doing that.
Oh, they are doing it too.
Big Kamala Harris supporters.
No, but they're saying the same things on CNN and MSNBC.
I'm not somebody that's a Democrat. I'm an independent who votes in the best interests of myself. And that is definitely not Donald Trump, someone who wants to erode institutions.
Okay.
We're going to move it on shortly, gents, but just quickly, Mason, in terms of the harm principle and like the more utilitarian way to look at that in particular, what is the reduction of harm that you're seeking to achieve, in particular with the border and with the policies that you said you were in favor of in terms of the labor force?
Yeah, I think like Donald Trump's implementation of removing families and that separation, I don't think that does any good to prioritize American security. I think at the end of the day, that's just something to show how strong the U.S. is taking this issue and how we're going to punish people who do come here without proper documentation. So for me, I don't think that that's something that is an effective strategy. I think Royce and I agreed on that on foreign policy, that using fear as the tactic is not something that leads to that type of results, instead of actually just leading the way and showing that this is something that we want to prioritize with people who are here for actual good reasons versus people that come here with nefarious reasons. And I wouldn't say that that's every immigrant that's coming through.
That's a conflation.
And just quickly, Royce, I know that you're not a utilitarian yourself, but if you had to step into the paradigm for a second, in terms of Kamala Harris and the Democrats' policies, who do you think is being harmed the most by that?
With Kamala Harris, well, obviously the American working class and middle class. The whole thing is on their back. They're paying for the whole thing. They're paying 3 times. They're getting taxed through the eyeballs. And it's not even, again, I mean, you can giggle or laugh at it, but it's not like it's something they're saying, they're admitting. They're saying that the American taxpayer has to pay more taxes, that the American taxpayer has to give more for our humanitarian ambitions all around the world. This is the fundamental principle of globalism. And it is egalitarian in nature, and it is utilitarian in nature. And we do justify the omnibus legislation that gives the Department of Defense $4 trillion of inventory, and $2 trillion just goes missing. And then Kamala Harris and Victoria Nuland and Robert Keegan and Amy Klobuchar and Lindsey Graham and John McCain back when he was still alive, and some of the Bushes and Karl Rove, they all say that America has to uphold democracy all around the world. If America's not stable, then it threatens democracy, the project of democracy all around the world. Well, guess what? If America collapses, I think it's really going to be threatened. I mean, how can you say in the same breath, we want to help and defend our allies, but we're also going to bankrupt ourselves doing it? There's nothing utilitarian about that. And we are bankrupt.
The only thing is you would be right if any of that was relatively true. The only thing is it's contrary to all fact. On average, undocumented immigrants contribute more in taxes than they consume in public benefits. And this is
which
estimated.
Part about what I said wasn't true?
You said that this is crippling the American people. You said the people that are being hurt at the end of the day is the working class.
Our country's $37 trillion in debt.
No,
it's not an opinion, sir.
Undocumented immigrants contribute nearly $50 billion in federal taxes between 1996 and 2005.
Our country is $37
I know that you're having a hard time with these facts.
$172 trillion in unfunded liabilities. We are bankrupt. You're talking about a tax system. Wait a second. You're talking about
whose economy right now, if crippled, would unravel the entire global economy?
whose economy would cripple
Yeah,
the whole
yeah.
thing?
Who's one of the only central glue that keeps them all together? The
wait.
United States.
No, wait, hold on.
If our economy goes down, do
No,
you know how
sir.
many other global
No,
industries are
sir.
going to completely collapse?
Sir, excuse me. You are shit. This is what 25-year-olds do. Okay.
What?
This is what 25. I'm sorry to tell you, this is what 25-year-olds who have no real concept of monetary policy do and say.
Yeah, keep
You
going
actually
with
at the same time,
instead of a
at the
deal with
same time, you're
gasoline.
saying, at the same time, we're saying, and Kamala Harris is saying, look, we got to provide for everybody else. The entire world needs a chance to do their thing. We're going to keep crippling their economies so we can steal from them. And that's what the liberals have done. And we're going to say that you actually believe in the fiat narrative. See, this whole time you think that because I referenced the debt, I believe that if America's economy collapses, that wouldn't be to their agenda, or that it couldn't be fixed, or that it couldn't be continued. The whole point is to drag America's economy into collapse so that they can have the global economy and dollar that they really want and desire. And they're open about saying that. They want one world currency and they want a universal basic income. That would put everybody dependent on the government the same way they made those nations that those illegal immigrants are coming from. That's not a theory. It's not a hypothetical. They're saying it. If you didn't hear it, I'm sorry that you haven't heard that.
No. I'm totally hearing what you're saying now. We're bankrupt. We need to figure out a way for PATA for that. So let's make sure that we elect the guy. Let's make sure that we elect the guy that's been bankrupt 6 times.
I want to be clear.
Bankrupt a casino.
See, there you
like
go.
this is going to be the person that's definitely going to help our economy.
Now you're trying
Great job, Royce.
Now you're trying to conflate company bankruptcy. Listen, first of all, companies go bankrupt all the time. Okay.
Gotcha.
The only company, the only entity in the history of human civilization that could forcibly print money and still go and force the people to pay money and still go bankrupt is the American government, the United States federal government. So there's nothing like having a real estate business. Okay. You don't get to forcibly make the people pay. The only thing that you could say is that the corporation through the Fed has been socialized. And if you want to say that, it would make sense, only contrary to your point, because where those illegal immigrants usually come from is some form of socialistic economy. And we see that the socialistic economy doesn't work. It's sterile. And crony capitalism isn't the answer. But we have socialized the risk in this country, going all the way back to my beginning point about how it's not interweaving narratives and going on a tangent. You have to understand macroeconomics and baseline economics to understand what we're talking about. The Federal Reserve has socialized the risk for the corporation. Now, some liberals and communists and Marxists and far lefties, socialists, they're in favor of that because, hey, the bigger the government, the better. But what we've seen is that the purchasing power of the dollar has decreased. Okay, so and to your question, when you say which economy would bury the whole system, not one of them. The perception that the system would be buried is what's more important, because under that perception,
2008 that happened.
People would lose their rights. People would lose their rights quick.
All right, gents, I've enjoyed the spirit of debate. I'm gonna
for people that are watching, just look up 2008 housing crisis. You'll see exactly which
you guys buried Cornell.
Continue, Jake. Continue, Jake.
You buried Cornell West. He was Occupy Wall Street. You buried him.
I think we heard enough, Royce. Keep going, Jake.
You buried him. You buried the one guy who threatened the Wall Street bankers. So
all right. We're gonna move on to some super chats here. What have we got? Just saying something's for $20. Thank you very much. There's support from the Crucibles Moist Mafia. Hold it down, Jake. Lay the truth on him, Royce. Christ is God. Thank you very much. Angel Barber says, shout out to Royce White from the Crucible crew. Appreciate your work on the Call Me Crazy podcast and Professor Penn on Hebrews. You know what that is, Royce? Thank you, Jake.
Yeah, that's the podcast between me and Professor Penn.
Yeah, guys, go check out.
Go
check out Call Me Crazy podcast.
Thank you.
We have got Chicken Pork Adobo says for $5, I'm voting for Kamala Harris because she's a cat lady BIPOC woman. She was chosen by the elites because she's endorsed by the Chinese to end war.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect.
Isaac Hayes says the U.S. needs a border like Poland's. Agree, disagree?
Let's have a border like China's.
Okay. C for $2 says the top 1% gets the most because they pay the most tax. 50M never in compete. Tim A. Waltz, thanks for the difficult name to pronounce, says it's policy. to kick innocent college kids out of rallies like she did while belittling for being Christian. Also, Trump's not screaming like Hitler. Kamala is. How's the L? Ignore Marxism and Hitler BS. We got C for $2 says you don't need 10 million illegals for the labor pool.
Right.
Joe for $5 says deporting them is far cheaper than keeping them. Guy in the middle is delusional. And since when has the left cared about the cost of anything? Mason, you got a response for that?
Yeah, again, it's just inaccurate completely. I mean, the only way that we're going to have the bureaucratic costs necessary is to increase taxes in order to get these people out of here. So if a party actually wants low tax, they should not be in favor of increasing spending towards law enforcement to create a bigger government in order to ensure that we're getting as many people who don't have documentation out of here, instead of just figuring out who these people are and giving them that documentation. It's a much more cost-effective method. And regardless of what your feelings are on the situation, the facts are just contrary.
What about the harm? Why would we assume?
Well, thank you for conceding that it's not the cost. It's an ideological.
No, I'm just asking. I'm just asking about the harm in your context. What about? I mean, why would we just give people who we have no clue of who they are and what they're about documentation just because for the fiscal cost? Hold on, wait a second. I'm not for that at all.
It's about finding what these people are. It's not just giving documentation. You're not just handing them over, hey, this is your proper.
But how do you think you do that?
It's increasing the pathways in order to do that. Right now, we have an immigration system where it takes about a decade to even be considered to be a citizen.
That's fine.
That's what's wrong.
That's fine. No, that's not wrong. You should
Okay,
go.
great.
You should go through. No, because your basis. Your real sole basis in advocating for the open borders and illegal immigration is an economic basis. I mean, it's Marxist to boot. I'm not sure if you realize that, but the goal of Karl Marx, I know you don't really. 10 years from now, you'll look back and you'll go, "Whoa, that was spot on." But the goal of Karl,
it's not Karl Marx when you're saying the exact. Why would people like
I'm going
Tim
to tell
Cook,
you,
who you just said was a CEO of a corporation, agree with?
He's a Marxist.
Tim Cook's a Marxist, the
Yes,
CEO of an American U.S. corporation.
Yes, he's a social Marxist.
Oh
yes,
my God!
he
Next
is.
thing you're going to say is Jeff Bezos is a Marxist.
They're both cultural Marxists. Absolutely.
Let's go. I love this, Royce.
No,
Jake,
seriously?
are you going to make sure that you release this entire video? You're not going to like cut it.
It's
out?
live streamed, brother. So
Wait a second.
Thank you so much. We
Wait a
just got
minute.
Royce saying that
you seem
CEOs
to think-
of American corporations.
let Royce explain because
Marxists.
he's made
Keep going, Royce.
Royce.
Keep going.
You seem to think because they're rich that they can't hold communistic ideals on a pedestal.
God. You're right.
You think Xi Jinping is poor?
Oh my God, they want to help the working class. You're right, Royce.
No. Oh, see, that's the problem. You actually think Marxism and socialism is meant to help the working class. That's what I was going to get to.
All right,
Marxism and communism and socialism are all from the same intellectual tree.
Can you define what communism is in just like 2 sentences? For me,
I'm about to. I'm actually about to.
Maybe 2 sentences and then go into your.
The goal
your
of communism. The goal of communism was one to get rid of God. I mean, they were pretty explicit in that in their writings. Secondly,
so that's the tenet of Marxism.
Secondly, the goal is for sure it's secular to boot. There's no doubt about it. In fact, many Marxist professors and Marxist academics say openly that there can be no God. There can be no God where there is successful Marxist and communist policy.
Is that why we have things like liberation theology?
No, it's why in China they've outlawed the public practice of faith and religion, and it's why in Russia.
So China is what's
in
happening.
Russia they genocided 20 million Christians in communist Russia.
So usually when people have a good foundation of what an ideology is, they don't have to point to.
In the two most successful communist regimes in human civilization, in the history of human civilization, both saw mass genocides and the suppression of free speech and religion. That's not an argument, buddy. That's a fundamental fact. Secondly, what Marxism tried to do was reduce the human existence down to price, so that when people like you have these conversations about policy, they start off by saying it's egalitarian and humanitarian, but then it always comes back to the labor pool for some reason. What are we talking about the labor pool for if it's about ethics and morals? And how can you say, how can you
show the contrary of people who claim to be capitalists,
how
but
can you
want
tell
to
a young
decrease
woman
economic growth for the United States?
How can you tell a young woman?
It's highlighting the hypocrisy.
Single black mother, how can you tell a single black mother that has to work 2 jobs on the south side of Chicago to make ends meet for her kids that the welfare system and family court have strategically kicked out of the home? The father of, so she's alone. How can you tell that single black mother who's, I don't know, 23 years old, that she has to leave her job and be worried about some immigrant from Venezuela who we say we've done a good job of vetting? I mean, why would you, somebody who says we should shrink government, you agreed on that early on, why would you, somebody who says we should shrink government, believe that your government, this federal government, is at all equipped to properly vet illegal immigrants who have no form of documentation. Who are we calling to ask about these people? Their old neighborhoods back in Venezuela? Their old neighborhoods back there in Ecuador or Peru? What are we going to call their governments, the despots and warlords? I know, let's call China and ask Xi Jinping about the 10,000 Chinese nationals coming across our border. Let's see what he has to say. Didn't Kamala, Jake, am I mistaken? Didn't Kamala Harris say in the debate that the one dig on Donald Trump was that he praised Xi Jinping and we know we can't trust him? But now we're going to go back and call Xi Jinping and the Ministry of, I don't know, birth records and criminal records of China to tell us about the 10,000 illegal Chinese nationals that are coming across our border. Who are you going to vet these people? Where's that information coming from exactly? Or are you just doing it off whim?
All right, fellas, I'm enjoying the spirited debate, that's for sure, but we're going to have to keep moving with the chats. I've completely
Please
lost
get him to
my
answer
way.
that question, Jake, at some point.
Oh,
I'm ready, Royce. I'm ready to answer any
you go for
question.
it,
I just didn't know when I could get a word in when you're just going on these like.
I do that. I do that. I tend to
got you.
dunk on people like that.
Are you dunking or are you just
intellectually
keep talking?
Tell me
Royce, what's the question? And then we'll kick it to Mason.
Who are we going to vet these people who are coming across our border to give the American citizens?
So you don't believe in the power. You wanted me to answer the question, but I can't get a word in. Gotcha, Royce. Yeah, so you don't believe in the power of the border security. You don't think that we're able to.
No, I believe in the power of border security to keep them out, not to vet their backgrounds.
What do you mean? You don't think that the United States is one of the greatest nations in the world when it comes to identifying who these people are? Are you anti-patriotic, Royce? Come on now.
Do you believe that? You actually believe you believe the federal government has some grand resume for being able to identify people from other countries?
That's interesting that you want to be an employee of the federal government. You actually want to be somebody who's leading the federal government when you're so antithetical to what government looks like.
No, that's not true. I would like to shrink the scope of what the government promises. I would like to shrink the scope of what the government promises the American citizens.
So we'll shrink the scope by empowering the government.
I don't want to promise
Americans as much as
something we can't do
in order to go through bureaucratic costs to get people out of here.
I don't want to promise.
Very small government of you, Royce.
Yeah, as a United States Senator, I don't want to promise the American people that we could properly and safely vet Venezuelans who are coming across our border faster than we can count them. That is not something I, as a United States Senator, would want to promise the American people.
All right, gents, we'll get a few of these more in. So King Ginger for $5 says, stop using the term legal immigration. That's just a technicality. That's a wave of a magic wand to make illegal immigrants into legal immigrants. Ron Key for $5 says, Mason, how can you say Republicans and Trump supporters don't care about immigration when they passed the HR2 in 2023 and it still sits on Schumer's desk?
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize what legislation that we can actually pass in this country. We had a bipartisan border bill that has been proposed that Republicans shot down because Trump said it hurt him politically. So that's something that we see. They don't prioritize actually securing the border when we have legislation that can't be passed.
It's not true. He shot the bill down because we wanted to put military funding into it, and that's a bad cultural and political practice.
We have staffer testimony saying that elected officials were advised to vote against the bill because Donald Trump wanted to run on the border.
Now you want to trust the staffers.
No, it's not just staffers, Royce. You didn't even let me finish. He said this on 4 occasions at his own rallies. Yeah, that's where we got that specific testimony from. And Donald Trump corroborated that.
You trust the staffers like you trust the veterans, right?
Oh, my God.
The staffers and the veterans, right? Those are people who are going to run the country. Staffers and veterans.
All right, let's take it from the words of Donald Trump, who said that. I was worried that we weren't going to be able to run on the border, but we are.
On to the next one, fellas.
Now because we were able to shut down the bipartisan.
Well, first of all, if I'm going to defend what Donald Trump said there, what I'll defend is the fact that what he's saying is.
All right, so now we're just going over the staffers, right? Now you are admitting that.
What I'm saying well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he's saying that, but if I was to say that in his position, what I would be saying is, don't allow the Democrats to use the increments of election cycles to switch their position 180 to make it look as though they care about the border when all the evidence is to the contrary, and that's what the bipartisan bill was intended to do. But that's not even the main point. What I would really say is maybe something different than Donald Trump. I'd say there's not a border bill coming through this body that's attached to any money for Ukraine. Period. End of story.
All right, let's move it on, fellas. Got to whiz through these chats really quickly. Siege D says for $2, well, thankfully I'm 24 and not 25, Royce. King Ginger says the interest rate has surpassed $1 trillion, while America only brings in $4 trillion in income. It's not sustainable. Cut the spending. Jake, Shadow Citizen, for $2, says just voted for Royce yesterday, next Minnesota senator.
Appreciate that.
Maureen Bannon for $2 says, you speak truth to power, Royce.
I know they hate it. They hate it.
King Ginger for $5 says, the reason it takes a
Jake,
decade
us Negroes, Jake, aren't supposed to know how the money works. That would be too contrary to the welfare system. I'm kidding. That's
King Ginger for $5 said, I wouldn't know, Royce. Says the reason it takes a decade for citizenship is because of the illegals who cut in line. By the way, you can't tax yourself into prosperity. That's insanity. As somebody who is trying to get citizenship at the moment, guys, I can tell you it is very difficult indeed. Rundar the first for $5 says, Royce probably gotta get to the point quicker. Mason, bigger attention span, buddy. More than 5 seconds, please. Any response to the criticism of that one, fellas?
Yeah, I think it's Royce is an excellent politician on being able to really avoid questions about policy and just continue to talk in these monologues. I'm not a politician. I'm going to be very straight to the point when I talk about what I view on specific economic plans or policies, because I think that's what's really productive to the conversation.
Hey, did you ever, just by chance, have you ever heard John F. Kennedy speak?
Have I heard John F. Kennedy speak? Yeah, absolutely.
Do you like the way that he spoke?
I do like when presidents are able to orate and have communication skills when it's specifically addressing the nation. But when it comes to debates, I think it's more productive to go over specific policies. That's why I'm going more in depth with that.
Have you ever seen Ronald Reagan's debate with Walter Mondale and back and during their race? You ever seen that debate?
I typically don't think that presidential debates are productive. Would you agree, or would you say that they are?
Okay, so you like John F. Kennedy, and you only like when people talk or orate.
No, I think Ronald Reagan was a great communicator.
So, but I'm talking about the way
you didn't say JFK's debate. You just said a JFK speech. Those are two different things.
What I'm saying is, no, the JFK speech and how he spoke in general, and then the Reagan Mondale debate. That's what I said. But my question to you is, do you not see? And maybe this is a fixture of the American education system, which we should probably talk about. I don't have anywhere to go. I'm free. Maybe at 25, you probably got somewhere to go tonight, but at 33, this is all I do. So my question to you is, do you think it's maybe like a byproduct of a broken American education system that we have no appetite for the bigger picture? And we tend to think that the bigger picture is some lofty, sort of unattainable, undigestible conspiracy theory. Don't you think that helps the crony capitalists that you're talking about? That don't you see? Do the crony capitalists operate on an ivory tower or not?
Royce, I started this conversation by saying that I think it's important to go over historical context and the root causes of how these issues.
But every time I've done it, you oppose it.
No, that's not what it is. You can add the historical context while then going into addressing what the specific policy is without making it a 10-minute monologue where it's the Royce show. This is supposed to be a debate where we're having a back and forth. We're able to address each other's points.
That's an open debate.
And I'm trying to be as respectful as possible. Maybe I'll start interrupting more.
Please.
We're going to move on to democracy now. Another one of the hot button issues at the moment.
How do I talk about democracy without talking about the history?
Is it under threat? Do you think that Donald Trump or Kamala Harris pose a particular threat to the democracy of America? We'll start with you, Royce. What do you think? Do you think that either of the candidates?
Okay, I'll
Mason,
go first.
You want to start?
No, I'll go first. I'll be short.
This
is the same one as what I've been talking about before. Democratic liberal order. Yeah, it's a scam. Yeah, we're not bringing democracy anywhere. We're making nation self-determining. The idea of American democracy that we promoted after World War II was a sort of symbol of how we came through World War II, how we were aiding how we aided in the victory of World War II. Really, the Russians won the European theater in World War II. They gave 20 million soldiers. They drowned the Germans in blood, or everybody in Europe would be speaking German right now. So the Russians gave a great deal of national treasure to win that war. But anyway, America added material support. And the reason why we said, hey, we're going to bring this show on the road is because of who we had become. But how we became that got lost along the way. Democracy as a buzzword is one of them. And I'm not saying I'm adverse to democracy or democratic process, but like Eric Weinstein said beautifully, about a month back on the Modern Wisdom podcast, there are two types of democracy. There's type A democracy, and what these individuals that support Kamala Harris are talking about is type B democracy. Type A democracy is by the people, of the people, for the people. The type B democracy they're talking about are the democratic institutions that sprang out from World War II that are too important to be challenged. And they say it openly. So is Donald Trump a threat to that type of democracy, those institutions? Absolutely, and rightfully so. And we all damn well need it. Is he a threat to democracy fundamentally? Well, we could talk about whether we're a constitutional republic or democracy in the first place, and there's perfect validity to have that debate. But if there's anything you could say about his tenure in the White House, he was in there for 4 years, and democracy really wasn't threatened. It really wasn't. They tried to impeach him. They waged lawfare against him. The one inciting moment that they claim and they hang their hat on about democracy in general is January 6th. And what more could the man say other than be peaceful? And if you want to make one person responsible for what everybody else does, there is nothing American about that. There's nothing that resembles American justice about that. The presumption of innocence and individual accountability or responsibility, or if need be punishment for your crimes or the things that you've done to other people, is a cornerstone of the American identity. So we can't say we want to bring democracy to Afghanistan if we're not even willing to uphold the presumption of innocence here in this country. It's a scam.
All right, Mason, we'll kick it to you in just a second. But guys, I just want to remind you to quickly like the video if possible. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, subscribe to the channel for daily content and lots more debates in the future, hopefully. Also, this is going to be uploaded to the Reality Based podcast as an audio version on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and the likes. And if you guys would like to get your super chats in, we'll read them in just a few minutes. Mason, what do you think about democracy? Is it under threat?
Yeah, I loved again from Royce. I thought that was a very flowery monologue. I love to hear it. I think it's very entertaining. But one of the fundamental pillars of any democracy are free and fair elections, the peaceful transitions of power, constitutional limits, and Trump has disgraced all three of these. After losing the 2020 election, Trump threatened Georgia's Republican Secretary of State with a criminal offense unless he found enough votes to flip the state red. When he refused to comply, realizing that these state-led Republicans might not go along with his plan, Trump turned to Pence to reject the results at a national level. Pence, too, refused. He said, this is not within my constitutional abilities as vice president of the United States. Understanding Republicans were not going to ruin their careers to entertain his delusions, he turned to the only person he could trust, which was himself. When Congress prepared to confirm the 2020 election results, Trump held a rally lying to attendees that he had won by a landslide and provoking them to stop the steal. His lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, urged supporters to engage in trial by combat, as he added on, warning them that if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. I don't know what we should do if not take a president's word seriously. I think that Royce would agree after we just talked about the importance of JFK and Ronald Reagan's ability to orate and communicate. We should take presidents at their word. And when Trump is saying all of these things, which have been falsifiable, we have understood that no state was within the election fraud limits to actually overturn that state. We understand that this is not a credible claim of fraud. I don't know why Royce is laughing when these have been taken to bipartisan courts in every single swing state. So you deny the 2020 election. Is that right, Royce?
Yeah, I've done it multiple times. Yeah.
Okay, why are you running for office if you believe that we don't have democratic institutions?
Wait
why do you encourage people to vote?
Just because there's fraud in one election doesn't mean that it's a categorical inevitability. Number one, let's just say that just because there was fraud in 2020 doesn't mean we shouldn't continue to participate in the process. Actually, if I was to say one thing about there being fraud in the election,
one court case
if I was to say,
if I was to say in 2020, well, now I'm going to interrupt you. You encouraged me to earlier. I don't know why that you're saying that there was fraud when this has been proven false in every single case.
It hasn't been proven at all.
What court case have they been able to win? Why did Donald Trump leave the White House?
Contradicted itself on this
if
issue.
Donald Trump actually believed that this election was stolen from him, why would he leave the White House? Isn't that a terrible leader?
You want to work on MSNBC?
Isn't that being a terrible leader, Royce?
I get it. You want to work for Mika Brzezinski. There's a bunch of you white dudes.
Why would Donald Trump allow the swamp to take over his elected office? Why would he do that?
I can tell you. One, I'll say this: if there was one goal that I would say is the most insidious of perpetuating fraud in elections, would be to disincentivize American citizens writ large on either side of the aisle from participating in them. So that's one component. So I would even if I knew categorically where the fraud is and how much it happened, I would still run in the elections because it's our American and civic duty to do so. Okay, that's called sacred honor.
You don't know where the fraud is, but continue.
No. I said even if I knew how much and where it was, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know exactly how much fraud there is because by my estimation, and oh, by the way, the estimation of your presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, and my opponent, Amy Klobuchar, there seems to be a lot of insecurity and fraud in our elections, or at least plausible. Who am I to measure it all? I mean, but we can agree on both sides of the aisle here. Maybe you're not aware that your current presidential candidate and my opponent, Amy Klobuchar, both said on MSNBC that the machines are not secure. Now, when they say,
talking about Dominion, the ones that won the
well,
lawsuit
no, wait.
against
So,
Fox News and
excuse me,
Tucker
sir.
Carlson?
Are you aware that Kamala Harris and Amy Klobuchar both said on the record back in 2018 that the machines were not secure and that we should go to paper ballots so that the Russians can't hack our elections? Are you aware of that?
I don't know what this has to do with Donald Trump losing
I'm
every
asking
single
you a
case
question.
he brought
Were
to
you
an
aware of that?
independent court.
Were you aware
He
of it?
hired the Cyber Ninjas,
Were
which is
you
an
aware of
independent
that,
agency
sir?
to find this fraud.
Were you
and he
aware
didn't
that
find this
your
fraud.
candidates
I want you
already
to at least
said that the
acknowledge
machines
what's
aren't
going on.
secure?
You
Are
can't
you aware
acknowledge
that
what happened
your
with Donald Trump. I
presidential
know that
candidate
this is
said the
hard for you
machines
to
aren't
answer.
secure?
I know this is hard for you to answer, but you can't point to one instance of fraud
Are you
besides your
aware?
feeling.
No.
And
I
Royce,
don't have
I think it's
I
important
don't
to
have
really
to
go
point
based
to
on
the
the
instance.
facts,
All
not
right,
based on your
fellas,
feelings.
Point to the fraud
just a
specifically.
second. We want to be able to ask questions and be able to get the answers. So quickly, Royce, you had a question. Was he aware of?
First of all, I don't have to answer the question about the fraud specifically because a lot of that
Of course
would
you don't.
require it will require evidence that currently our voting system and in many cases the federal government and court system. And mind you, now when I don't know where you were when George Floyd died, but I was out in the streets organizing the biggest protests and demonstrations in the entire country.
I saw that in my research.
We took
appreciate
15,000
your
people
support
to the
with
federal.
BLM.
I'm sorry. I thank you for that. I was trying to bring people to the Federal Reserve to teach them the importance of economic policy versus police policy. But, the liberal media didn't really like that too much. But my point is, when I was out there, the entire echo of the movement at the time was the entire system is guilty. And the majority of that guilt that they claimed from that system was nestled right there in the judiciary, right there in the court system or the legal system or the criminal justice system. So how can you guys say in the same breath that the same court system that you decry every time a black man is killed, now we're supposed to trust when it comes to our elections? Don't you see that just the narrative, the premise is being a bit dishonest on face value? Doesn't that contradict? Are they different courts? Are you under the impression that these cases went before different courts or a different legal system than you say is guilty when it comes to black men? I'm a black man. Why should I trust the system when it comes to elections if I don't trust them when it comes to police?
Is that a question for me to answer? You're going to continue going on?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, we can absolutely talk about incarceration rates and how there is predisposed biases towards certain groups of people. What we can't talk about is Republicans and Democrats on a bipartisan level agreeing that the certification of the election was true.
This is amazing.
How is it amazing?
Now
You think Mike Pence is a liberal? You think Mike Pence is a liberal?
I do think he's a liberal, actually.
Let's go.
I think
we got
Mike
another
Pence
clip. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No, I think Mike Pence is a liberal. I think George Bush was a liberal. I think Mitt Romney's a liberal. I think Mitch McConnell's a liberal. I think I think Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney are liberals.
Yeah, and this is the
they're
threat to democracy.
neoconservatives.
Is anybody that you disagree with is a liberal in your mind, which you just
maybe
use
it would be
as
helpful if we got
antagonists.
some terms and definitions. So Royce, when you say liberal, what do you mean by that? And what
He
would
means
you
anyone that
define
doesn't agree with Donald Trump.
That's not what I mean.
Anybody that's not loyal.
That's not what I mean. Actually, what I mean is the advent of the conservative movement back with Barry Goldwater was quickly transitioned once you get to Reagan and Bush. And as Bush rose to power and has maintained a lot of power there in DC for a very long time, it was the advent of what we call neoconservatism. The entire edifice of neoconservatism were these were more social liberals that claimed to be fiscally conservative. I don't even
Barry
believe
Goldwater's social liberal? Is that what you're saying?
No. Barry Goldwater was the advent of the conservative movement. He's considered the founding father of the conservative movement, the modern American conservative movement. Shortly after came the neoconservatives.
The guy against the Civil Rights Act, right?
Shortly after were the neoconservatives. Okay. Mike Pence is a neoconservative. Absolutely. And the whole calling card of the neoconservatives, their appeal to the broad electorate was that they were more liberal than their more conservative counterparts. So, yeah, when I say that Mike Pence is a liberal, I mean he and the entire sort of Donald Trump, the people who oppose the MAGA movement, regarded as extremism or America first, or really people who want to get out of these wars and stop the spending. That's what we're really talking about. All of those people are pretty liberal. Yeah, not only are they liberal, and what I'm saying is a sort of ideological description, they're very liberal in their spending, and they can say what they want. But every time they vote for a war that we can't win, that's liberal fiscal policy. So technically speaking, he's a liberal, and he did vote for a lot of wars, and he would continue to. Mike Pence, but he's an archetype for the entire Rhino neocon cohort, and we don't like them. And I would suppose you don't like them either. It's crazy for me to hear you say that we should only trust these Republicans who otherwise are detestable in every way.
I'm not saying that we're trusting Republicans. I'm saying
every time you say bipartisan, you're saying I should trust it more because Republicans were involved.
We see gridlock in Congress. Just because we're seeing people disagree doesn't mean that I agree with everything that they say. But if they're able to come together and say that we understand that this is not fraud in this instance, how is that something that we're supposed to distrust?
Let's trust them just with the fraud, huh? Like people who were frauding the American people would really come out and say in a bipartisan way, we're frauding you guys.
So you think that Republicans are at an advantage by not having Donald Trump as the executive right now? You're ludicrous. You're delusional.
Which Republicans?
The Republican Party, the GOP, the grand old party.
Which Republicans?
And let's go down the list. You want to talk about Mitch McConnell? You want to talk about?
Yeah, I think Mitch McConnell
McCarthy?
is not.
You want to talk about your guy Matt Gaetz?
Yes.
We could talk about them all.
Oh, don't talk about those three in the same sentence. See, there's where you're going wrong.
Sorry, I know that they don't have sexual assault charges, but keep going.
You think Matt? I mean, you can get, and that's what the left does. They divulge into the personal character attacks. I'm talking about geopolitics,
Sexual
sir.
assault's not something that should be.
I'm talking about geopolitics, sir. Stay on task here. There is a significant difference in ideology between Matt Gaetz, Mitch McConnell, and Kevin McCarthy. And yes, Matt Gaetz, from his worldview and his angle on American politics and where this country should go, would certainly benefit from a Donald Trump leadership. Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy, it's feasible that they orchestrated the entire field of candidates that opposed Donald Trump, not only in this recent election, but back in 2020 and in 2016 as well. See, but they don't tell you that part at the liberal institutions and the social sciences. That's why you don't know who Barry Goldwater is. I mean, it's almost.
I know who Barry Goldwater is. What are you talking about? I just said the person that was one of the founding antagonists against the Civil Rights Act. Absolutely, I knew who Barry.
You do realize the difference between conservatives and neoconservatives, right?
No, the conservatives that you're talking about, is it paleo conservatives? Is that a synonym for what you're talking about? Do you know what
you
paleo
do know the
conservative
difference
is?
between
We could do this.
paleo conservatives? No, we don't use. I don't even acknowledge dietary descriptions of political.
That's not
groups.
what it is. You can look it up if you don't understand what that is.
But these Judeo-Buddhist vegans always come up with these hyperbolic terms.
What are you talking about?
Really
this is
relevant.
someone like Nick Fuentes, somebody who you'd probably agree with on ideology. He's a paleo conservative, and he acknowledges that.
You think that I would agree with Nick Fuentes?
Yeah, you don't. This is somebody who agrees
I don't.
everything with what you're saying about the global reserve and the world order.
The broad brushes that you're painting show two things. One, you don't have a very good understanding of the historical context of the American political culture we have now. Two, you don't know basic differences between conservatives
and paleo conservatives. If you don't want to use the word paleo, then
you think I would agree with Nick Fuentes. I mean, listen, I'll say this. The point I'm making, let's get back to the elections and the fraud. You still have not answered my question. And I'm not saying, listen, what I'm saying is, in order for me to find the fraud, is just like Edward Snowden said, a lot of the things that we need to find, or the evidence we would need to acquire to prove some of these theories or some of these allegations or accusations against our government, have been made illegal to find, have been made illegal to acquire. That's why Edward Snowden's not living in this country now. But furthermore, I'm not so sure about how much and exactly where all of the fraud was, but I do know that the entire mainstream media has tried to paint Donald Trump as being crazy, simply suggesting that there could be fraud. And that has been a mainstay of the liberal mainstream media's message. And myself as well. I've been actually a firsthand victim of that. To suggest that the elections aren't secure at all is regarded as conspiracy theory. But Amy Klobuchar and Kamala Harris said it in 2018. Are you aware that they said that? And do you accept the premise that the machines aren't secure, just like they said?
Well, I can admit that there obviously are going to be instances of fraud. We're not saying that by nature, every single election with every single vote is secure. But what was found in every court case that was brought from the Trump team, who said they had clear evidence to show that the 2020 election was stolen, that there was none that was seen to actually be worthy of overturning the election results. And that's something that's important. I do trust Donald Trump's team. Yeah. People who said that they didn't have evidence to actually provide that showed contrary to the election results. That's important. So I do trust Donald Trump's team. I don't know who you're trusting besides your own feelings that you're upset that Donald.
Excuse me, sir.
Go ahead, Royce.
Excuse me. So you don't trust Donald Trump to lead the country. You do trust his team.
We're going over people. Donald Trump's
team. The people
we're talking about the bipartisan people, the bipartisan congressional leaders who said that the election was certified. We're talking about multiple.
Name one. Say who specifically?
William Barr. So you don't trust William Barr, the person that
No, I don't trust William Barr.
So
No, and I
Royce,
think
Royce,
Donald
I'm
Trump
having a
knows
lot of trouble right now. Let's talk right now.
Why would you think that I trust William
Do you
Barr?
think that an executive, the people that they choose to be with them is important? If I was the executive of a company, don't you think that the people that I hire within my company is a testament to my character as a leader?
No.
Oh, really? No.
No,
So
no,
if I choose bad people that are trying to sabotage my own company,
that's
I'm a good
collectivist.
executive. We
No,
just say,
listen, sir, young man. That's collectivist thought.
no, it's not. This is
Yeah, you think
capitalist
that Donald Trump
individualism.
should bear the you think that Donald Trump should bear the lion's share of the culpability in the people that he selected. What you're missing is
why do you think that
individual
CEOs
free will.
deserve
And I know that the liberals do not believe in
All right,
individual
keep
free will
interrupting.
anymore.
I know this is a difficult topic for
You
you to
guys don't
address,
believe
but
in
keep
free
interrupting.
will. You
Keep
believe in
interrupting.
totalitarian state control that undermines free will. And you
I'm
believe in the
loving these
presumption of guilt.
non-sequiturs, Royce.
You believe in the
Anyway,
presumption
we're
of
going
guilt.
back to what's important right here.
You believe in the
which is
presumption of guilt
you
and guilt
think
by
that somebody that is
association.
the CEO of a corporation should get the lion's share of profits because they take on a majority of the risk, which means we're acknowledging that their ability to make decisions is an important reason of why they're up there at the top. So
no,
what do you
the reason
think
why the reason why they get the lion's share of the profits is because they have the lion's share of the private ownership. It's a legal designation. It's a legal mechanism. They have the lion's share of the ownership of the equity and of the shares. It has nothing to do with their.
So you don't think decision making there should be any accountability?
No, decision making is important.
Okay, then let's talk about the decisions that he made, the people that he hired, who you're saying are all these corrupt
again. What I'm
individuals.
saying again, this is where the liberal argument starts to collapse on itself, like a house of cards.
No way.
You're trying to say that Donald Trump is guilty by association for all of the people that he hired, or you're trying to say it validates the things that they've said against him. But that's a guilty by association mentality. There's nothing remotely American or appropriate about that. It's one of the most un-American things that you could possibly suggest. In fact, in your own case where you're supporting Kamala Harris, we could easily say you're guilty by association by accepting the endorsement of warmonger and Dick Cheney, who's responsible for the death and the harm of so many lives. It's almost unfathomable. But we don't do that, or we shouldn't do that, although we do tend to do that because Dick Cheney's so reprehensible. But in your example about William Barr—
We're not going to disagree on that, voice.
But in your example about William Barr, yes, many people who are in positions of power have the great misfortune of selecting individuals either to work in their companies, to help them with endeavors, to start a family with, or have friends with, or whatever, that end up letting them down and not being exactly or living up to the what they expected from them. That's a part of life. That's a part of being human. That's not an indictment that's not a wholesale indictment of Donald Trump because William Barr didn't live up to the expectations, and he didn't. And when it comes to the fraud of the election specifically, I'll go back to the question that you seem to refuse to answer. When you say that we accept that there's fraud is possible, the liberal media does not accept that, sir. That is not true. You're being dishonest.
No, the most media outlets, when they have talked about these specific court cases that Donald Trump tried to say proposes or substantiates this amount of fraud, they used right-wing sources. Do you think the Heritage Foundation is liberal? Do you think it's neoconservative? What label would you give the Heritage Foundation? Yeah.
I would think they're tilting pretty liberal, yeah.
The Project 2025 drafters were liberal?
Yeah, well, I'm not even going to Project 2025. That's like anybody who's
Donald Trump himself has said it's too conservative for him. So you're just living in fairy tale land.
First of all, why do you predicate everything on what Donald Trump says when you're asking me?
Because you are just aligning
That's the difference
with
between
what
us.
Donald Trump says.
That's the difference
You don't
between
have
us.
individual thoughts, Royce. You have to agree with the Donald Trump
No, I
mentality.
disagree with a lot of things that Donald Trump says and does. That's the difference. We don't have a unilateral and vertical integration over here on this side of the political aisle. Not in the MAGA movement.
In the MAGA movement, absolutely. That's what MAGA
No, we do
stands
not.
for. Yes, it is. It's a filler. It's a filler for
Now
Donald
you're just
Trump
saying
loyalists.
that, but I can name several things that I've disagreed with Donald Trump on.
We're not talking about those specific policies. We're talking about the election.
Now we're not talking about specific policy. So if
we're talking about the election.
So let me get this right.
What's the topic right now, Jake?
Let me get this right
real quick.
If I have agreement with Donald
Trump, we're meant to be doing
democracy.
There
we go, Royce. So let's talk about democracy when it comes to Donald Trump. The people.
If I have disagreement, if I have agreement with Donald Trump on any specific issue, it means that I'm wholesale in agreement with him on every issue.
No, that's not. We're talking about this specific issue right now, which is what the MAGA movement is in alignment of. Would you say that there are people in the MAGA movement?
You said everything.
Can someone say that the election was real and still be a part of the MAGA movement? Can you answer me that?
Yeah, they can for sure.
Name me one who you wouldn't call a rhino. Name me one who you wouldn't call a rhino.
I would just disagree with them.
William Barr, is he a part of the MAGA movement?
No.
Okay, give me the examples why.
No, because he's a neocon.
William Barr is a neocon.
Yeah.
Give me
Yeah,
one of
he
his
is.
foreign policy takes that he tried to advise to Donald Trump.
He's a neocon.
Because he
He's
disagreed with Donald Trump saying the
No,
election
he's
was
not.
rigged.
It's not because he
You keep
disagrees.
going
It's
back and
because he
forth,
was a
Royce,
neocon.
and
He's
this is
been a
what's so
neocon.
self-defeating about your argument is you can't stay
It's not.
consistent on any of
No,
these.
it's very
You're just going
consistent.
back and forth.
No, I can
When
call the
people
balls
don't
a
agree with
strike
you, they're a
fine.
neocon, and when people agree
No,
with you,
these
they're a
people
MAGA
are
patriot.
neocons.
That's how it
No,
goes.
no, that's not what I said. No, there are plenty of MAGA patriots I disagree with on a lot of things.
All right, fellas, we're going to move on to a few more super chats here, and then we're going to talk a little bit about foreign policy. We've got about 10 or 15 minutes left, so I want to respect your time as well, guys. I appreciate you making time tonight. So Siege D says, hey, Jake, would you be interested? Oh, that's a one from before. We've got, sorry, guys. Howie Brown for $20 says, our government agencies run like money pit. I hope Elon Kennedy Trump efficiently approved government services. Spare the audience of your false tropes. And we've got Conservative Compass for $20 says, got to fact check him, guys. Trump never instructed anyone to inject bleach. I think that he's trying to say. He asked a question to a doctor during a live press conference. Alrighty, so guys, last thing I would like to get both of your perspectives on is the wars that are currently going on around the world. The war obviously in Ukraine and the war in Gaza at the moment as well. What are your perspectives on that? We'll give a quick 1-2 minute breakdown of that, and then we'll get into a slight back and forth. And which candidate do you think is going to be better for world peace if that is your objective? Starting with you, Royce.
In the forever wars. Our country's bankrupt. Close the border, end the wars. Yeah, we can't be an empire. This is how the Roman Empire fell. All of these academic elites and intellectuals know that when a country is defending more military outposts than it can pay the interest on their national debt, they're effectively insolvent, and the military is going to start to feel it next if we haven't already. And if we have, I'm sure out of national security, our Department of Defense wouldn't make that public knowledge. So, yeah, I'm pretty firmly against being involved in wars that we can't win. And that's another fixture of the international rules-based order, that in order to bring peace, we need war. And that's been a mainstay since the end of World War II. You know, have we lost 80 million lives? No. You know, have we lost 80 million lives in 6 years? No. So I guess you could say it's been successful in that sense. But what it's done is caused extreme distrust in the global community, which is why when Bibi Netanyahu stands up at the United Nations, 2/3 of the countries get up and walk out. It's not because they hate Jews or Israel. It's because we said the United States dollar would remain neutral. And Vladimir Putin showed the entire world by going into Ukraine. 48 hours later, Joe Biden says, we're taking them off the SWIFT banking system. You know, it's one of the most brilliant strategic military moves in the history of human civilization. For that reason, the prevailing narrative was the United States dollar was neutral, and Vladimir Putin showed everybody it wasn't. So now we got a couple of fires we got to put out. One, we can't afford the wars. That's number one. Number two, we're in wars that don't serve our national interests whatsoever when you really look at it. Three, we can't win the wars. And number four, there's a growing global narrative that's completely anti-American, some for good reasons, some that have been foisted and you know, brought to life in the universities from here to Beijing.
All right, Mason.
Yeah, I hope Royce would agree with me that both of the candidates currently running for office are seeking to perpetuate the military-industrial complex. I couldn't say that either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump would be necessarily easier on countries like Iran. It seems like we're getting closer and closer to war with Iran, regardless of which candidate is in office. Royce might dispute that claim, but it's just not true looking at both of the records of both presidents. Donald Trump and his administration deployed about 198,000 soldiers. Biden deployed about 160,000 soldiers, which is like 30,000 less. But in my mind, I think that we shouldn't be involved in any of these international conflicts. Royce and I might be in agreement that the U.S. should prioritize our needs over the needs of other countries. Donald Trump had 65 people that died in combat. Biden had about 16 people that died in combat. Drone strikes, Biden has increased about 550 drone strikes. Donald Trump is anywhere from 300, which was his own administration's testaments, to other testaments like if you look up dronewars.github, it's an independent agency that tries to really see amongst a variety of different independent agencies how many drone strikes were conducted. Some of the higher estimates are around 14,000 from Donald Trump. Now, I can't substantiate that those claims are true, but again, that those are some of the projections that are offered. Both of them didn't start any new wars. I feel like that's a talking point that's brought up by people who are supporters of Donald Trump, is that there were no new wars that were started. I think it's a semantic argument because Congress has never declared war since 1940 during World War II. Even Vietnam War was not declared by Congress. This was something that was an action of the executive. And so for me, it's a little bit of a semantic game, especially when Donald Trump increased Syrian military strikes. He abandoned the Kurdish people, literally left them to die, who are our military allies helping us defeat ISIS. So for me, it's like I could make criticisms about both administrations. It feels like with Royce shaking his head, he's going to be doing a lot of defense for Donald Trump, which if you do agree that the U.S. should not be involved in military international conflict, I don't know how you could support an administration like that.
Oh, really?
Go ahead.
I mean, of course you would say that. I mean, that's just, I get it. The left is gonna, the left is willing to die on this hill. They're willing to die in the flames of a nuclear fallout there in the heartland.
I just said Kamala Harris is inching closer to war with Iran. I'm being objective here, Royce.
No,
I'm not cheerleading for my candidate like you are.
It's not about Iran. It's actually she's inching us closer to a war with Russia, the one that you failed to mention, the one that actually has the nuclear potential, the overt nuclear potential. Because Russia's a nuclear superpower right now. Iran aspires to be one. We don't even know if they have nukes actually. So
who is it that supports Iran again? Who is it that's like an international ally of Iran? As someone who's going to be a senator, I'm sure
Obama.
that you know.
Obama.
Obama's an international ally of Iran, not Russia.
Yeah, he's an international ally of Iran for sure.
Yeah, and Russia is not an ally of Iran.
Oh yeah,
Do you know this as a U.S. senator?
Are the Russians in a coordinated alliance with Iran and China? Yes. It would appear so.
Okay, then what are we talking about here, Royce?
I'm not sure how the question's relevant. I think Obama's given just as much aid to the Iranians.
You tried to make the distinction that Russia's the only one who could have nuclear possibilities. Iran doesn't. If Iran is tied in with Russia and China, obviously a military conflict with Iran would result in those nuclear weapons, or has the potential to result in those.
Oh, you think the Russians would potentially give nuclear weapons to Iran,
or actually conduct a strike on behalf of Iran?
You think the Russian? Well, then you don't know enough about the Chinese people, the Russian people, and the Persian people. I don't think that.
I think you got stumped there, and you're getting a little defensive. But keep going.
Okay. Well, I'm pretty sound on my foreign policy, especially when it comes to military conflicts. But we can certainly dive deeper. What I'll say is your claim that the Biden administration didn't start any new wars. Well, the Biden administration, per your own sort of standard, because Donald Trump appointed William Barr. So Barack Obama appointed Joe Biden, and Barack Obama was involved in a new war. And even more importantly, Joe Biden, his time in DC extends all the way back to when we first went into Iraq and Afghanistan, and I believe he was in support of those efforts as well.
He was absolutely 100%.
Okay, so if Kamala Harris is now part of his administration, is he under the same sort of scrutiny or moral ethical standard as William Barr under Trump?
Royce, I think you failed to hear me at the beginning of this when I said that Kamala Harris and Donald Trump don't offer any productive solutions when it comes to de-escalating military.
Oh no, but when you look at the totality,
crazy how I said that.
No, when you look at the totality of the political lineage of Kamala Harris all the way back to George Bush Sr., they've been involved in most of the new wars, not just some of them, but most of them.
And what do you mean? Donald Trump, all of his allies come from, most of Donald Trump's allies when it comes to foreign policy advisors are coming from the Bush administration, which led one of the largest war crimes in American history.
That was a mistake.
Okay, great. Then I don't know what we're arguing about when we both agree that both of these candidates have terrible records when it comes to foreign policy.
Only one of them currently acknowledges those mistakes.
Who? Donald Trump? He said that he made a mistake in his first term, is what you're saying.
Donald Trump knows very well the mistakes he made with trusting the neocon and rhino establishment in the Republican Party. Absolutely.
Interesting. Okay.
Kamala Harris,
that you admit his faults. I'm glad that you admit his faults.
Well, I mean, I think he said it already. Yeah, he's made some mistakes in the people he's chosen to be around him, but you can't.
But it's going to be different this time, I trust.
Well, I think we should at least take on face value what they say their priorities are from the outset. Kamala Harris says that we will defend the Ukraine to whatever. In fact, she says we'll defend the Ukraine until we recover every occupied territory there in the region, and that would include the Donbass and Crimea. And Russia says it's a red line, and we're basically baiting the Russians to a nuclear strike. We're saying Putin claims he'll launch nukes, but we don't really believe him. That's what the conventional party line is for the Democrats right now, and Kamala Harris hasn't deviated from that one bit, not even an iota. Okay, she is fully committed to the escalation of conflict with Russia, as too is the entire Democrat Party. Donald Trump's the only one who said, we're going to make peace. In fact, I haven't heard anybody in the entire Democrat Party talk about peace when it comes to the Ukraine and Russia conflict. I haven't really even heard them talk about peace when it comes to the Middle East region. I mean, I've heard them talk about peace or ceasefire in Gaza, but I haven't really heard them talk about peace in the entirety of the region. And see, there's where you can see the real fangs of the uniparty. What I'm saying is that when Donald Trump threatened to pull out of NATO, that was the most significant thing a United States president has said regarding foreign policy and our military footprint and spending since the days of JFK. By far, not even close.
I think it was even more influential when he said that President Xi is a noteworthy leader because he instills fear in his people and people respect him.
No, he isn't.
Interesting.
What do you mean that? Why do you not think do you challenge that?
I don't think that he's somebody that a U.S. president should aspire to be. Which Donald Trump is saying
now you're conflating two things.
No, Donald Trump said that he wants our people to treat the president like they do in China, which is just antithetical to any democratic regime.
You just conflated two things. You just
I didn't. I'm mentioning two things that he said.
No, you said that noteworthy is the same as aspiring to be like somebody. That's not true at all.
He said that he wants the people of the United
That's
States
not the
to
quote
treat
you
him
referenced.
with the same respect that
not
he
the
does.
Quote you referenced.
Yeah, it's like that people can say two different quotes. Isn't this crazy, Royce?
He is noteworthy.
Isn't it crazy people can
he
say
is
multiple
noteworthy.
things?
I'm asking you about the first quote. He is noteworthy. Yes, he is. First of all, he's the leader. Of the third or second biggest superpower in the entire world. So by that standard alone, he's a noteworthy leader.
You wouldn't say Biden's a noteworthy leader, but continue.
No, I would not say Joe Biden's a noteworthy leader.
He's the largest military leader in the entire world. What do you mean? I just use your own standard.
No. The standard is not solely that. You couldn't measure it that way. But what also is true about President Xi is he can stand up and talk in front of his people for an hour straight and not lose his train of thought. Joe Biden can't. And Kamala Harris and all the rest of the Democrats perpetuated a lie that Joe Biden was mentally fit, and he certainly isn't. And everybody saw it, and they all pretended like they didn't, which is the biggest indictment of anything in this entire campaign season. Joe Biden's mental capacity.
As well. To pretend like Donald Trump is mentally there is just wild to me.
I know you would say that. The point is,
what do you mean?
President Xi is a noteworthy leader. Okay, he's been a very successful leader by means that we wouldn't agree with here in America, but as our national mortal enemy and adversary, we do have to acknowledge who he is and who he has been and who he can be going forward if we're in a competition with him. That's prudent leadership. I admire Donald Trump for saying, hey, don't get so caught up in hating your enemies that you fail to acknowledge what the real threat that they pose and how competent they are at leading.
Again, this is a pivot away from my main criticism, which is him saying that the American people should be respectful of the president in the same way.
No, what he was saying is, okay, well, I'll answer the question for myself as United States Senator. If I was to say that, which I didn't say that, and I'm not so sure that you're not taking it out of context because you seem to not know very basic things like Kamala Harris said the machines weren't safe, so it's hard for me to take you on face value here. But if I do, for argument's sake, if I was to say that the American people should be more or be better suited towards their leadership like they are in China, the easy argument there is that China has a very national culture and has a very ethno-national culture. In America, Americans have been brainwashed by their academic elites in mainstream media outlets to think that American citizenship, that national pride, is a relic of racism. So I actually agree with them on that front as well. I'm glad you pointed it out. I need to call Donald Trump up and say, hey, man, we got some newfound common ground here. I like that you said this, because what he's saying is if you're in a war with another country, then your politicians and leaders are in a conflict, in a competition, but also the spirit of your people. This is something Americans used to understand when we had American civics in the schools. There's a morale in the populace, and we've lost that because for some reason our leaders and academic elites are very anti-American in their spirit. So what's actually very true in what he's saying there is that the Chinese people in large part, not all. Obviously, the Uyghurs there in East Turkestan, who none of the Democrats ever want to mention, but a lot of the Chinese people there in mainland China do have an affection for the CCP and their leadership and the ideas of communism, and they're willing to fight and they're willing to live and die for those ideas. We're losing that here in America. So in that sense, we do want to try and be more like the Chinese, not for the same reasons or the same values, but at least in the outcome and in the result. Can you agree with that? Or you think we shouldn't have it? We shouldn't. You just said you believe in us, giving more or prioritizing our nation. We're losing that battle with China and Russia. Their people prioritize the nation. So we should, even you're saying we should be more national oriented.
I don't think that the leader of a nation should impose fear in order to get the respect of people. That's what I'm.
Do you think
against,
President
which is
Xi
what
does
Donald
that?
Trump said? Absolutely, and I think that you would be mistaken if you don't agree that an authoritarian regime that not only spies on its own people but has the largest surveillance state in the entire world. These are not things that we should appreciate.
Oh, I'm the biggest China hawk you'll find. So why is it that all the Democrats are okay with China becoming the center of the future global economy?
See how you can't stick to an issue because you were just such big on President Xi, and now you're not on President Xi.
No. I'm not big on President Xi. I'm a China hawk. Let me be clear with you, sir. You're not tracking the conversation well. Because you guys talking these silos. You guys talking these silos with these one hit, with these like, hits you do, like these one-line hits for some, I don't know, 15-second piece of content that Kamala Harris is going to spread through the Democrat chat groups. Let me help you, sir.
Kamala Harris is going to spread my stuff? Interesting.
Oh,
maybe. I think she watches Rattlesnake TV, boys. So.
Hey, listen.
She's a super chatter. She's the next one that comes up.
I'm not saying that I like President Xi. I'm saying that I understand his position and I have to acknowledge his success. What I'm saying is, why is it that the Democrat? I was one of the first people to publicly talk about the Uyghurs on national television, and the entire mainstream media that is liberal leaning. You have to admit that. They completely ignored it. They didn't even want to talk about it. In fact, some of them said it was a conspiracy theory, although the United Nations has ruled it a humanitarian crisis. You see how the humanitarian crisis designation even is sort of a la carte and selective? When the illegal immigrants or the Chinese nationals are coming across our southern border, that's a humanitarian crisis. But when President Xi puts 2 million Uyghurs, ethnic minorities, Muslims, in concentration camps, that's not a humanitarian crisis for some liberals. And if we agree that it is a humanitarian crisis, if we agree that President Xi is an authoritarian and totalitarian dictator who we should impugn, why is it that the entire Democrat Party and their liberal intellectual globalist thought leaders and academics have completely conceded that the future of the global economy is there in Beijing? Why didn't Kamala Harris stand up as the vice president or in the Senate and say, I'm bringing a bill forward to suggest that the tariff should go to 200%, and the manufacturing here in America should go from 0 to 1,000 to ensure that we're not entangled morally and ethically with a nation that we fundamentally oppose.
Does China pay these tariffs? Real quick, Royce.
What first, you didn't answer my question. I'll answer that. But first, what Democrat has really stood up and firmly opposed China?
I'm not somebody who respects the Democrats on their foreign policy takes. I mentioned this at the very beginning of this conversation.
Do you not think foreign policy is high? Do you not think foreign policy is high up enough on the chart of American political culture to be a determining factor of how you vote?
I think that foreign policy, regardless of what administration goes in, is there to perpetuate the military-industrial complex. You're going to hear.
But we're not talking about the military now. We're talking about the moral hazard of being intertwined with a nation.
Why do you think that you'd be against other nations is to increase our military stance and our military presence against those nations?
What I'm asking you
That's
is,
the whole point.
Do you think that we should have a China-dominated supply chain? And what Democrats have fundamentally opposed?
I think that the United States should have manufacturing here, which is why we should have legislation like the Chips and Science Act to ensure that we're getting away from China dominance. If you don't want Chinese dominance, we should have things like initiatives to install green renewable energies, because by definition, non-renewable energy programs are by definition non-renewable. So if we run out of them eventually, which country do you want to be the innovators of this technology? Personally, I want the United States. I think not only are we the strongest innovator in the world, I think we could get rich selling this technology to other nations who need this in order to uphold their energy grids. Right. And if you want China to be the people to do that, you're unpatriotic, Royce. That's it at the end of the day.
do most of the components for the solar and renewable energy sources come from China, manufactured in China right now?
It does, and that's why we should have more manufacturing in the United States, which is, like I said earlier, something like
Which
the Chips and
Democrat
Science Act,
has
which
stood
is
up and said that?
investing. Stood up and said what?
Which Democrat has stood up and said that American manufacturing should take precedence over all the other cultural one-issue topics that the Democrat platform stands on?
Actually, this is a great
There's one
point
big
to bring
contradiction
up,
here.
Royce.
You think
Royce, this is a great point to bring up.
Wait a second.
Hold on, let me finish.
You think
Royce,
American manufacturing is
if we
separate
take
from the climate
a
agenda?
fraction, if we look at the entirety of
This
this
is what
debate,
they take you on.
let
They
me
take
talk,
you on
Royce.
these roads.
Jake,
that
am I
don't
good to talk in this debate, or are we just here for the Royce show?
Hey,
Go
stop
for it.
lying. You're lying.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I
You're
appreciate
lying.
it, Royce.
That's the problem. I don't do well with liars.
Oh my God.
All right,
I
guys.
can't
I think it's probably getting
Hey.
towards the end now. Mason, you said you had 2 hours. I want to respect your time. Do we want to have a quick?
I'll say this to close, and then I can dip out. You look, I don't do well with liars. We can do the decorum thing. Is when people start lying, I rebuke and refute right away. What you're saying is a lie. You know, and I know, and everybody else
don't
knows
think that you like hard
that the
topics. Keep
American
going.
Manufacturing Initiative is fundamentally impeded by the climate
Just quickly,
agenda.
Royce. Is this your closing statement?
Yes, it is. The American Manufacturing Initiative is fundamentally impeded by the global climate agenda. And this has been the talking point of the Democratic Party, despite what they say about manufacturing chips or solar panels or whatever else. The reality is the excuse and justification not to ramp American manufacturing up to meet the demand of the threat we face on the world stage is because it would be detrimental to the climate. Because in order to match the Chinese, if you concede that we're in a manufacturing race with the Chinese, hell, back after World War II, we were willing to accept Nazis in order to meet the demand to race against Russia. But now all of a sudden, we're going to let the Chinese dump as much pollution as they want into the same one world that we live in because of the climate agenda. So what I'm saying is I'm not interrupting you just to be interrupting you. The argument is contradictive. We cannot meet the demand of competition with China in terms of manufacturing unless we're willing to forego our prejudgments and dogmatic belief about the climate. And you know it, and Kamala knows it, and Joe Biden knows it, and even more importantly, Xi Jinping knows it. And that's what Donald Trump was saying. He's noteworthy because he's playing us like a fiddle. Yeah, you play with the climate agenda while you get all the components from us. Or the N92 mask too. Remember when you go to pandemics,
like
you need the Chinese.
From that, but keep going.
Yeah, but we're not moving away from it, and we have it under Kamala Harris,
that's what
and we have it all the way since Henry Kissinger and Nixon went into China in the first place. It's been one long-standing initiative and momentum towards a China-centric global economy, and they finally got their wish. And Donald Trump's the only one who even started to brush up against challenging China with the tariffs, and all of y'all cried foul, and you said the American people are going to have to pay for it. They're paying for it now.
All right, gents, before we get into Mason's closing statement, we'll just quickly read some super chats. Just got a few here. Howie Brown says, good debate, guys. Appreciate all the debating. I also appreciate all of the debating. A master debate, you might say. Conservative Compass for $10 says, always leave someone on the left as a smoking crater. They're intellectually dishonest. Make them an example for the audience. Mason, do you want to give a last word, closing statement?
Yeah, I think that was a great point for Royce to end on, and I think it really highlights the dichotomy in this debate. I came on here to really be objective about these issues. I have criticisms of both candidates that are running for president, and I want to talk about the issues at length and the importance that they are to the American people. I disagree a lot with Kamala's policies when it comes to these issues, but when I view two people who have the opportunity to be the executive, I do think that Kamala Harris is going to be less harmful than a Donald Trump. And I think Royce really came on here to cheerlead for Donald Trump. I'd appreciate if you let me get through my closing statement without interrupting with that. But I think it is important for the character of a president as well, more so than just policy. I know that I really tried to make this a policy conversation, and we kind of got lost in the weeds there. But even on a character perspective, I mean, hey, I'm going to agree with the good criticisms. Kamala Harris is not the best speaker in the world. Oftentimes she fumbles, and it's difficult for her to talk at length's end. And she's done a lot in her past, like Kyle is laughing. This is something I respect Tulsi Gabbard for saying before, you know, certain events in the past couple of years. But she talked about Kamala Harris laughing about incarcerating people for even cannabis incarceration, which to me is just something that you can't do when you're on that same exact interview on the Breakfast Club saying that you're fine with smoking weed and you did that in college. That's just a complete deviation from what it is that you're saying. But if we're comparing that type of character to someone like Donald Trump, someone who's civilly liable for sexual abuse, someone who called his daughter a hot piece of ass with Howard Stern, someone who's a 34-count felon, someone who's a religious prosecutor, tried to ban all Muslims from coming to the country, someone who bragged about watching young women change during his own pageantry, and who cheated on all of his spouses. Like, this is not somebody who we should respect as a person of adequate character or somebody that should be the executive of a country. I think the personhood really matters, and it's just undeniable that Kamala Harris is somebody
unbelievable. You would even talk about his
Trump.
personal character. You guys got no moral high ground to stand on. You believe in taking toddlers and infants and underage.
Do I get a second closing? Do I get a second closing statement as well?
Please have 3. You could have 3 if you want. You could have 5. Because you know, when our founding fathers actually started this country, they locked themselves in D.C. for 3 months, and they didn't come out until the ideas were sorted. So I'm perfectly willing to tell you all night, sir, you had no moral high ground to stand on to talk about Donald Trump's sexual indiscretions or anything other comment that he made. Your side of the aisle is fundamentally in lockstep with an ideology and cultural norm where you bring underage kids to watch grown men dressed up in lingerie.
Notice again how Royce continues to go
lingerie.
Notice again how Royce continues on to go with the dichotomy of the political partisanship.
You don't agree with that?
I'm not somebody who's a Democrat. I came into
Do you agree with that?
I came into
do you agree with bringing little kids to drag queen shows?
Here we go again. Royce continues to deviate from the conversation.
No,
I'm not someone who's cheerleading.
You brought in moral character. I'm asking you
your side, your side, your side, your side.
Yeah.
What side are you talking about? I'm
Kamala
an independent actor, somebody who's talking.
I'm talking about Kamala Harris's side, but now I'm asking you a direct question. Can you steal man my
argument, Royce? Can you steal man my argument?
I'm asking you a direct question.
Do I support Kamala Harris in her entirety?
You do.
I do. Okay, thank you, Royce. Thank you.
You're just saying you don't.
I understand that you guys want to probably move it on soon.
You're just saying
Mason, if you do want to answer that question about
do you think it's okay to bring little kids to drag queen shows where they're dressing up like strippers and white liberal women are giving giving dollar bills to their daughters and sons to go stuff in the fishnet stockings of drag queens? Do you agree with that? Because David Pakman did. So I just want to know from you.
Royce, drag queens are not a cornerstone of my political ideology.
No, that's not the question.
Something that's important to me. I know that you might be thinking about drag performance every day, and maybe that's something that you.
No, my point is you can't talk about Donald Trump. You can't talk about Donald Trump's character because now your character's in question, sir.
Are there drag queens in the room with us right now?
When you say I'm an independent actor,
are there drag queens?
When you say independent actor, no, you're not, because you got the same party little sort of apprehension to answer that question straight. Same way David Pakman did. You can't say it with a straight. You can't say it with a full throat. You can't say that it's inappropriate and it borderlines probably should be illegal to bring a toddler or an infant or even a small child, a grade school child. Let's even go all the way up to high school for Pete's sake, to see a drag queen stripper show if you're an adult. It's completely inappropriate.
Do you think that we should jail parents that bring their kids to Hooters?
And there's your answer, Jake. And that's why I cut him off, because he's a cuck.
Oh no,
there
you
go.
Answer.
You're a cuck for the Democrat Party. That's
you couldn't answer, Royce. Why can't you answer with a straight face? Should we jail parents that bring their kids to Hooters?
First of all, what Hooters have you been to where the
I don't go to Hooters personally. That's not something I'm interested in.
So how can you even reference Hooters then? Wait a second. How can you even reference Hooters?
Because you're trying to say that the government has ultimate authority to remove.
This is what you guys do. You're talking this hyperbolic. You've never even been there.
Have you been to drag clubs? You've been to drag shows?
No, I've seen it with my own eyes. Are you talking about Hooters through a visual? Are you talking about Hooters? Is your reference of Hooters through a visual third medium, like you saw it on video? Is there some
you're so defensive of Hooters? Can't you just say that
I'm just saying there's a difference.
Consistent with your worldview, you think that the government should be able to, I don't know, penalize or jail, or I don't know what.
Do the waitresses at Hooters,
people who are bringing their kids to
the
Hooters.
Waitresses at Hooters stand up on the tables?
Do you think that Hooters is not inherently sexual? Do you think it's sexual?
No, I think there are different degrees of sexuality, of course.
Okay, gotcha.
You don't think so? Wait a minute. This is another important question.
Yeah, I wonder if the restaurant named Hooters is sexual.
Of sexuality? Do you think there's varying degrees of sexuality?
Royce, I think that.
Do you think a kiss on a sitcom is the same? Do you think a kiss on a television, a national broadcasted television sitcom?
I don't think a kiss is inherently sexual. You don't think that, like, grandmothers kissing their kids, you think that's a sexual act, or it's just a
no, I mean a romantic kiss. Let's make it more granular. Do you think a romantic kiss in a movie or on a television show is the same as watching a full-blown hardcore porno?
Obviously not. Who's saying that? You're creating this conflation yourself.
No,
I've never
you
once
just
said
said
that.
you said that the sexuality of Hooters
I've said that Hooters is an
should
inherently
be
sexual
considered the
place.
same as the. Why'd you ask that though? What does Hooters have to do with the drag show?
Because I don't think that the government should be able to dictate where people go in their free time. That's just something that's not okay for me. If you don't want to bring your kids to Hooters, don't bring your kids to Hooters. If you don't want to bring your kids to a drag show, don't bring your kid to a drag show.
You think we should be able to bring underage kids to
I just don't think I think
about
drag shows as much as you,
underage
Royce.
kids to the
I don't think I
bars,
think
right?
about drag shows as much.
You do realize you
That's what I'm
can't bring an underage kid to a bar where they're serving alcohol, right?
Yeah, and I think
They
that
can't sit at the bar.
I don't
You want
think
to
that
repeal that law?
I'm not saying that. But what do you
You just said that. You actually just said that. You said the government shouldn't be
You're talking
involved in
about
where you bring your
bouncers?
kids.
You're saying that we should have bouncers that stop kids from coming into drag shows? Is that what you're saying? Or
Well,
you're saying the police should get involved with arresting these people?
No, what I'm saying is that the Democrat Party has culturally accepted it at a spiritual and moral and ethical level.
And I'm saying,
not
what's
even
your
talking about
solution to this cultural acceptance?
Oh, my solution would be that people like Kamala Harris and anybody else who's on your side should stand up and denounce it and disavow it the same way you demand of Donald Trump and any other, extreme ideology that he may be loosely connected to from somebody who endorsed him, who he's never talked to. You may have never talked to a drag queen yourself personally, but you don't seem to be disavowing that extreme behavior.
Well, I have talked to
in Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's case, it's a little different. They actually do fraternize and sort of they kind of hang out with that crowd. They actually affirm it. You're not. I haven't heard you do that because I don't know you that well, but they certainly do. But
well,
you're not even willing to disavow it.
You're inherently labeling all drag queens as sexual, even though you just said that there's varying degrees of sexuality.
I didn't say that.
Some drag performances are people that dress up as like Grimace. I've seen Grimace as McDonald's, the mascot.
Grimace drag queens. Oh, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I was specific. I was very specific in my example. I asked you, do you think
personally?
it's okay?
I would not be okay with my kids doing that.
I didn't ask you that. I said, do you think it's okay for other people to do it?
I don't think that the government should be focused.
I didn't ask about the government. I'm asking about you. What do you think?
I would not bring my kids to that type of sexual show.
Do you think it's okay for other people to do it?
I don't police other people. That's my thing at the end of the day.
Then that's exactly what it is, right?
All right.
So you don't have any ground to talk about Donald Trump's morality or his character because you can't call those balls and strikes.
You're right.
Buddy.
We should just allow
you can't call those balls and strikes
civilly liable for sexual abuse. You're right. We should just throw that.
Was Joe Biden accused of rape?
Yeah, and I think that that's something that should be prosecuted if they're credible allegations. I'm not a Joe Biden cheerleader like you're a cheerleader for Trump. 100%.
Was Bill Clinton accused of rape?
Absolutely. Yes. Please, Royce. Now we're getting somewhere.
So why
doesn't these politicians accountable?
Let's do it. Yeah, let's start with this.
I love that. But the reason is you're throwing away Donald Trump. You're not okay doing that with Donald Trump. That's why you're doing these whataboutisms. You're like, well, actually, what about Bill Clinton? I'm in favor of prosecuting them all, Royce. I'm not afraid. Yeah, absolutely.
So how can you, if you're in favor of prosecuting Bill Clinton and Joe Biden, how can you, in good faith, stand up here and say that you're going to vote for Kamala Harris
when
interesting,
Royce. It's
she won't distance herself or disavow him?
Reduction is my philosophy. Wow, that's
right?
Crazy how you haven't heard me at the end of the day.
Conveniently, your harm reduction takes all of the moral flaws and inconsistencies and sort of.
I gave you the hypothetical at the beginning of this. If the candidate said I want to kill 500 people and the other one said I want to kill 1,000 people, both of those are terrible people. I don't think that killing
but
is
your
okay.
Candidate has
but
two
I'm
people,
okay with the 500 people.
Your candidate
over 1,000 people being
your
killed.
candidate has
I'm
two
saving
former
500
presidents.
people by voting for that person. You're not understanding this.
Your candidate has two former presidents that have sexual assault and rape allegations against him. That's two more than Donald Trump has.
You're voting for the guy that has the sexual assault cases against him.
Oh, so there's a separation
associated with.
Oh, wait a second. This is very interesting.
Oh, my
God. Jake, just give me the time here, sir. Please, Jake. I know you're probably busy, but this is important. You see how we're getting to
No, I'm actually enjoying this way too much.
You see how we're getting to the root of it? What you're really saying. Look at what you're saying here now. You're saying now that there's separation between the person having first degree involvement in the situation and the people who may be around them or associated
Royce,
with them.
You're trying so hard to defend somebody who is a rapist. Sorry about that. I don't know why. I don't know why you're doing that.
No, what I'm saying is you can't call the balls and strikes on it because you're unwilling to carry the same standard across the board.
What are you talking
You're
about?
saying you are. I'm going to explain it to you, sir, because you're having trouble. I know when you liberals get caught up in this manic defense of the Democrats.
You're the one who's been cheerleading Donald Trump this whole time. How's it taste?
Donald Trump was accused of rape. You're saying that
accused of rape?
Yeah.
No, there was an unbiased jury. There was an unbiased jury who found him guilty. How do you think the criminal justice system works?
He wasn't proven guilty of criminal rape. That's a fact. What are you talking about?
Because the statute of limitations was removed. That's the only reason why it wasn't a criminal case and was a civil
well,
case.
now you're talking about the technicalities. The bottom line is he wasn't convicted of criminal rape.
Technicalities are important. He was civilly held guilty of rape. That's something that's important.
Wait. You do realize the burden of proof for civil liability is way different than criminal, right?
Yeah, just because it doesn't have to be a 51% doesn't mean that this person's still
just because. That's an important point.
No, if
the burden of proof being 51%,
if you were trying to hire a babysitter,
is
Royce,
different.
If you were trying to hire someone to babysit your kids and they were held civilly liable,
so you don't believe in the American justice system,
but
right?
you think that person should be the president.
You don't believe in the American justice.
That's what's silly.
You don't believe in our laws. You don't believe in the way they work.
Thanks for the straw man. I bet it's really easy to defeat boogeyman.
You don't even believe in the standard. You don't even believe in the standard of burden of proof for civil versus criminal. So how can you use the civil?
What do you mean?
How can you use?
What do you mean? I never once conflated and said that civil and criminal are different. That's why I stated he was held civilly liable for sexual abuse.
That's not criminal.
I agree. That's the whole reason why I said civilly liable.
Then you can't say he's guilty of rape.
Just because you're held civilly liable doesn't mean that you didn't do the crime. It just means
it means that you're not guilty of it. It means that you're not guilty of it.
He's civilly guilty of sexual abuse.
He's not criminally guilty of rape, is what I said, and it's true. It's a fact. You want to take the verdict of the court as gospel when it helps your voter fraud narrative, but now you say, well, the evidence wasn't there in the statute of limitations. So
all right. Let's not even throw that in. Let's say him calling his daughter a hot
now you are going to throw that out, aren't you?
No, let's call him throwing out his daughter.
You see that logical deduction I just ran on you?
No, you're crying about it. That's the only reason why I'm moving from it, because we have multiple other points that we have.
Yeah, no.
Him saying that he'd date his daughter if they weren't related. That's fucking weird, dude. Come on.
No, he didn't say that.
He did. He literally said that on The View.
First of all, he didn't.
He said if that was my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her. You don't think that's weird? Yeah, there's the family values conservatives that I see.
You can't talk about. Wait a minute. Wait a second, Jake. Wait a second. You can wait a second. First of all,
yeah. Say it one more time. How about wait a second? One more.
First of all, let's go back to a marriage culture a long time back when men actually married their daughters away, and you were involved. Well, here we go. I mean, it was a part of our culture at one point. In fact, it still happens today. There's still arranged marriages actually in our country. 100%. It's not illegal.
And I think that would you disagree with
but in that culture, it's perfectly reasonable to say my daughter is a good catch, is a woman that a man would want to marry. I would marry her if I wasn't her father. That's not wrong.
And this is the contradiction.
You're trying to sexualize it because your movement is hypersexualized.
You're the one who's saying that everything's sexual. What are you talking
about?
If I
raise a beautiful daughter and I raise her with good morals and good values, and I think that she makes a suitable life partner.
And you'd say she's a fine piece of ass. That's the language you'd use?
He didn't say he said she was hot.
No, look it up. Look it up right now on Howard Stern. The whole audience can do that. If you're not ideologically predisposed,
if that's the words
listen
he
to what
wants
Royce
to
said.
Use.
Okay, now you're conceding it.
I didn't see the clip.
We can pull it up. Jake, do we have time to pull it up right now just to fact check this guy?
Is that the basis? What are you trying to say? What are you saying? He's a pedophile? Are you saying he's a pedophile?
I think it's weird to say your daughter's a hot piece of ass. And
but
I think if you're denying
that, pedophile.
Would you say it's weird?
Okay, is it weird that Joe Biden's daughter says that he took?
Here's the whataboutisms. Is it weird that Donald Trump said that his daughter's a hot piece of ass?
Wait, what's wrong with whataboutisms? The entirety of political debate is whataboutism.
Because I want you to give one criticism to Trump, and you failed to do that. You cheerlead for him this entire debate.
No, I'm just defending that he's a better choice than Kamala.
Gotcha. So it is weird that he said his daughter's a hot piece of ass.
And if you brought up something that I didn't agree with Trump on, I would say it.
What about when he said his daughter's a hot piece of ass? Do you disagree with that?
No, I think she is pretty hot.
Do you think that is weird that he says that as her dad?
I wouldn't say it. It might be a little weird. Yeah.
Okay, cool. There we go. I'm glad that you were able to admit that after 5 minutes. After 5 minutes of trying to ask you to do that.
That's not the point,
Thanks for finally acknowledging
I thought it was weird. I'll say this.
I
thought it was weird. I thought the context of him saying grab a woman by the vagina was conversationally weird. It's not something that I would say. But I don't know Donald Trump and his friend groups and how they talk. Me and my friends, we would probably say it a different way when we were in the locker room back in the day when I was playing sports or whatnot. We might not use that exact phrasing.
You grope them in a different way. Gotcha.
No, we would say it in a different way. We would say anything in a different way because we just talk different.
But would you agree with the idea of groping the woman?
No, what I agree with the fact that Donald Trump was expressing a very widespread cultural reality that women tend to have different sexual standards for men who have a lot of money or are
right. They let them grope them, right? Because when you're
they actually do. That's a fact.
I know. And when you're a star, you can do that.
Wait, are you disagreeing with that? Are you disagreeing with that?
I'm saying that Donald Trump saying that is.
Are you
is
disagreeing with the fact that women allow men a different sexual standard when they have money or some type of public prominence?
I don't think whatever pressure women feel in specific scenarios should be
Oh,
justified
yeah.
just because people
No,
are at a certain social
that's
standard.
not an answer. Do you think that
So
in
you think
American
women-
culture, women
Wait. You sound
differently?
like that you're one of those people that say if a woman was drunk and she was raped, then she had it coming because she got drunk.
I didn't say that at all.
Well, that's
Careful
the
the
same logic
TOS
that you're
boys.
going.
Can we use grape? Can we use grape, please?
I didn't.
Sure,
wait a
sure,
minute.
sure.
I didn't say that at all. What are you saying? I never said that.
You just said, is that not a reality that women just let a powerful men grope them? And I said that's a weird thing to justify and
That's
victim
actually
blame.
not what I said.
That is what you said.
I said, do women have a different set of sexual standards for men that have money?
But we're talking about Donald Trump specifically groping them. I know you're trying to water it down as much as we can.
No, he
this
fits
is
that
literally something that's
criteria.
wrong.
He fits that criteria.
Yeah, of somebody who admitted to groping women.
Do you think there are women? I'll ask you this question. I ask you this question. Do you think there are women that have had consensual sex with Donald Trump?
Yeah.
Do you think that he's somebody that your typical woman would find physically attractive?
No.
So why are they having consensual sex with him?
Because of the status. I never said that the women don't. I never said women don't consensually do that. I'm talking about the grope. I'm talking about the grope. Get dunked when he says I grab women by their what? Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
well let's take it a level deeper. Let's take it a level deeper. In Americans' modern sexual culture, is there not?
Jake, I'm so sorry, Royce. I've been having a lot of fun with this, and it's really fun to hear just hypocrisy on the right. But it is 30 minutes over my previous.
Listen. Yeah, no, I do understand. We did say we'd keep it to 2 hours, and I do appreciate you both being a good sport and staying on.
I'm surprised you don't have more to do as a senatorial candidate, Royce. I'm gonna be honest, but
the whole point is to preach the truth to the people. That's what your representative should do.
Fair enough.
And it's important to get on platforms. I think it's good when people get on independent platforms.
I like to debunk the propaganda
and everything. But Royce, you're always welcome on the channel. Mason, you're always welcome as well. We're going to put some panels together and everything. So let's stay in touch. I appreciate you guys both being a good sport. It's good to be able to throw hands in the debate and then to be able to just shake hands after and call it a day. So thank you guys so much. If you have any last words, you can put them in now.
I have one thing, Royce, I want to say, and this is a compliment. I really respect your ability to be an advocate of mental health. I saw that, I'm not bringing this up as something that's wrong. Like, obviously, you didn't have an NBA career because you're somebody who said that, your mental health is something that's worth preserving and it's important. Yeah. And I really appreciate you doing that. I wish you'd say the same thing for people who are marginalized, who are demonized, because there are a lot of people that are in your own corner that would say that you're somebody, who didn't have the strength in order to push through anxieties. And I don't think that personally. And I hope you'd do the same for marginalized groups. That's just one thing I wanted to say.
Okay. Yeah, I don't even know if take that as a compliment. That was like a compliment and then an insult all at the same time.
It wasn't an insult. I think that I'm just saying that people within your party I would disagree with who would be like critical of that. I think that fighting for mental health is something that's important.
I'll tell you this. When it comes to the MAGA movement and the American Republican Party, I'm the tip of the spear now. So if you want to talk about the Republican Party and who's going to be the vanguard or the standard bearer intellectually for the party, that would be me. So I don't really have to measure myself against anybody else in the party. We don't have that type of collectivist group thought problem over here. We have many disagreements on our side. I even have some with Donald Trump. To your NBA point or to the mental health point, yeah, mental health is a very important thing. I hate to see it weaponized right now on the left. I hate to see general anxiety disorder and depression and substance abuse and all these other very, very harmful epidemics in our American culture be conflated with this pseudo-intellectual field of study known as gender theory. I hate to see that. I hate to see the plight of Black people in this country conflated with an individual who wakes up on a Tuesday morning having heard their grade school teacher tell them they can change their gender on Monday and think, hey, I'm a Z-Zim. I hate, in fact, it insults me. And this is where I say, Jake, at the end, like I said to David Pakman, and I'll keep shouting these white liberals down every time you try and commingle this identity politics designation of marginalized with the plight of Black people. It's exactly why 50% of the Black men 18 to 44 aren't voting for your candidate.
All right, fellas.
Let's see the results on election day.
Once again, I appreciate you both. You're both always welcome back on the channel for any sorts of debates and discourse. Stick around, guys, if you want to do a little bit of a debrief. I'm going to have a chat with everybody. But once again, guys, Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you both soon.
Thanks, brother. Godspeed to you, man.
All right. Godspeed, man. Okay. What did we think, chat? Give me your analysis of the debate. It's getting on here. It's 11 o'clock in Medellin. Quick super chats here. I think we've got a few. Qtard said, this guy's a liar. Howard Stern said she's a piece of ass. And Trump, in his Trump way, mumbled, yeah. I'll have to check that out. I don't think I've seen that clip. Derek Young says, keep up the grind, Jake. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. I found that actually really interesting because it's always interesting when people go into a debate about the angle that they're going to take. And from speaking with Royce last time when he was on the podcast, I found his level of analysis quite interesting, which was why I really wanted to get him on for a debate. But he tends to look at the bigger picture a lot. And I'm somebody who's not overly interested in the sort of micro policies myself, which is why I enjoy talking to Royce. And I like looking at the broader spectrum of things. And in terms of the economy, for example, I actually quite like the argument that the US is obviously the global reserve currency, and that is probably the most important thing in terms of the US economy. Because if the US was to lose their position as the global reserve currency, and if they were to not foster the right diplomatic relations and economic relations with other countries, then you can imagine all of those dollars overseas that are getting traded in oil and that are getting traded by all of these countries. If they had to come back to the United States, it would cause inflation like we'd never seen before, way worse than the Great Depression. So I thought it was interesting how Royce came from that angle and was not really too keen to get bogged down in the micro. But yeah, Mason's got his points as well. I'm interested to know what you guys thought about the debate. It's obviously only the second one that we've done. Yes, I am in Colombia, by the way. It's only the second one that we've done. So what did you guys think about the format? Did you like how it was a little bit more free-flowing this time? Do I need to interrupt more? What topics would you like seeing? I think we might have one coming up on feminism, which would be good. If anybody wants to debate Andrew Wilson at some point, he's willing anytime, any place. So I'm trying to reach out to some liberals. I'm trying to reach out to some socialists and everything. But we will see. We'll see if somebody takes the challenge. Toka says, great format. You were just right. Thank you. I really appreciate that. A lot of people saying they'd like to see Andrew Wilson. Ivan says, Jake, I like how you let them discuss, but there were some parts where you do need to rein them in a little bit more. It's a complicated balance. Yeah, no, I do agree with you. There was a few parts where I was thinking, do I rein them in a little bit more? Do I keep this to like a free-flowing back and forth debate? But, actually the reason why I like talking to Royce, like I said, is because of his level of analysis. He's actually a smart guy. He's very well read, and he looks at things on a very large scale. So it's a little bit hard sometimes to be able to get a guy like that and try to get him to stick to certain policies, because his mind will wander and go into other domains, which I like. But in terms of a free-flowing back and forth sort of TikTok brain debate that we like to do, it is a little bit difficult. But I do actually, personally, I like the long-form debates. Like, I love watching apologetics debates between Christians and atheists, where they get to stand up and give their 10-minute opening remarks, and then everybody gets to do that, and then eventually they get to do a cross analysis where they can be short and sharp. And Vinny, if you're listening, chuck some chats up on the screen if you see any good ones, because I'm rambling a little bit here. But yeah, that's my favorite kind of debate. But I know that it's a little bit more interesting for you guys to have the sort of debates that we see on Piers Morgan, where we can be short and sharp with all of the points. But there's my mum. Says nice work, sunshine. Thanks, mum. Appreciate it. Cheers. Back when I had one subscriber, that's who it was, guys. So never too old to get told off by your mum. And to have support. Ron K says, Mason dodged everything, even my SC question. Didn't even acknowledge HR2, just went on about bipartisan bill. He cried about interjections, clearly doesn't understand what a debate is. Yeah, so, I mean, with the theological debates that I want to do, because we've got a fair few Muslims and a fair few guys who are really pro-Israel and a few guys who are really pro-Palestine, it's probably a bit better for me to do the Harvard-style debates where they can have long introductions and then where we can do the cross analysis, because we really need to get into the weeds with those sorts of ones. But yes, John Burt says the new beginning. Oh my dog, I'm like brain fried here. Complete brain farts happening over here. John Burt says the beginning of the debate versus the end of the debate. It's like it's two completely different shows. I actually do agree with that. Yeah, I was really. What do you guys reckon? I was really enjoying the end there, where they were just getting in there and just slugging it out. But it does take a little bit of a time to warm up sometimes, and we'll be posting some clips and everything. But no, I do agree with that. There's much more entertaining when they're going at it. Morbius says that Mason guy being dodgy and backhanded when Royce was asking questions. Yeah. Look, I mean, I really respect Mason for coming on the show. I mean, Royce is a guy who's been doing politics for a while, and he's a smart guy, and he's a good debater as well. And I appreciate that Mason heeded the call, because guys, even though I don't agree with these liberals, I've got to be nice to them, because otherwise none of them will ever come on my show, and none of them will ever come on my debates. So I've got to be nice to these liberals. And Mason seems like a good guy, man. Like, I would probably get along if we didn't talk about politics or religion, at the dinner table. Dr. Day Solo says, Jake, I'd say I want you to get Andrew Wilson versus Charlemagne the Gay. I don't think that Charlemagne would come out of his studio, to be honest, and it wouldn't be a fair fight, that one, because I don't know. Charlemagne the God had Kamala Harris on his podcast on the Breakfast Club last week, and I know for a fact that Candace Owens, because she said it on her show, messaged him saying to Charlemagne the God, ask Kamala Harris if she is black. What's her black heritage? Candace Owens has been doing a big series on this, and now it appears as though she actually doesn't have any, and she's been appropriating blackness. She's been appropriating the identity of the help in Jamaica. That's a pretty sinister claim. So if Charlemagne the God wanted to do some real journalism, he would have looked into that. And if he really cared about black people, then it would be so devastatingly offensive for Kamala Harris to do that. But he didn't bring it up. So it's super, super disappointing from him. Uniquely Mystical, thanks for all of your chats. I saw you in the chat a bunch there. It was nice to have a bunch of input. Said, would have helped if Mason actually did research, resorted to insults and slander to fill the silence. Well, I think that a lot of these young guys who do the Twitch streaming and the TikTok debating and everything, they have a lot of talking points, but then if they get dragged into deep water in terms of global monetary policy and the sort of more intricate details of foreign policy and history, then it really is not their comfort zone. It really is a way for them. So yeah, with a guy like Royce, you have to account for that. One Canadian bachelor says Andrew Wilson versus Furby. Who is Furby? I'm not sure who Furby is. JM Archives, do a Judaism versus Christianity debate with Rabbi Tovia Singer. If you can message me his profile or something, that would be great, because I would love to get one of those going. LA Stray says Andrew Wilson versus Australia's Minister of Men's Behaviour. I don't know if you guys saw, me and Andrew Wilson had a debate of our own. It was a comprehensive debate about whether or not Australia is real. And it was a fearsome debate. And if you guys want to check that out, it's on the crucible.video. Also, guys, let me know if you want to see more live debate breakdowns. I can ask Jay Dyer if he wants to come on with me and break down the Dawkins and Peterson, if Jay Dyer's got some time, because that's an interesting one. I don't know if you guys saw the Richard Dawkins and Jordan Peterson debate that just happened. To be honest, I found it a bit frustrating myself, because I don't appreciate when somebody goes too easy on a guy like Richard Dawkins, because they sort of start from a level of analysis where they just both assume truth and they just assume objectivity and they just assert objectivity, whereas Jordan Peterson has more of a legs to stand on, because he has an actual ontology for good and evil. But Richard Dawkins in his books says that there is no good and evil. It's all just blind, pitiless indifference. So, I mean, if you do say that, then how can you have a leg to stand on to say that God is a capricious monster? Or how can you have a leg to stand on to say that that Islam is worse than Christianity, which is what he said? And how do you justify that? So I would like to get into that a little bit. I appreciate with those religious debates when people actually challenge the presuppositions of the atheists and make them account for their presuppositions and not just assert them, not just assert good and evil. But anyways, Grid One Motorsports, so great to see you in the chat. Grid One, a legend. Rattlesnake TV, the Furby is Melanie Star Fox, a trans. It would be a poor debate. Yeah. And guys, by the way, last on that conversation, Trump's not not ugly. Not ugly. One Canadian bachelor says Jake versus Jim Bob. Well, I've actually already debated Jim Bob, but he's more of a friend. We actually agree on pretty much everything. But we were meant to debate about libertarianism. I was sort of taking the libertarian point, and Jim Bob was taking more of the sort of Christian nationalist point. But my only point was that I was defending the utility of libertarians. I wouldn't call myself a libertarian myself. I definitely wouldn't be a libertarian, but I was defending the utility of libertarians and the utility of classical liberals in the fight against leftists. So we had an interesting back and forth. But yeah, Jim Bob's a smart guy. And actually, me and Jim Bob, I think this week even, are doing a 2-on-2 live stream debate, because I've been going in and doing some TikTok debates recently. I'm trying to figure it all out, how it works, so that I can do TikTok invasions and do it live. And I've been tangling with a few people on the issues of abortion and atheism, etc. And I've got a few of these libs, these TikTok libs, who want to come and debate on the channel. So I think there's 2 of them though, so I need to find a partner. And Jim Bob said he's down for it. So if you guys don't know Made by Jim Bob, go and check out his channel. He does some great stuff. We enjoy that whole crew. So Dr. Dre Day Solo says, Jake, you should debate someone, but who would you choose? Have Andrew moderate. Yeah, Andrew wants to do a debate soon on the Crucible. I'm happy to do it if they find an opponent. I would probably not be the strongest debater in some areas. It just depends what topic we'd do, to be honest. I would think I'd be very confident doing debates on like masculinity, why young men are moving to the right, why young men are rejecting the nihilism of the left. I'd definitely be interested in doing that. I'd definitely be interested in debating the existence of God, and that's something that I'd be open to doing. However, I'm not a Christian apologist. I don't have nearly enough biblical knowledge to debate Christian apologetics, and I would never embarrass the faith by doing that. So I definitely wouldn't do a Christian apologetics debate. But I would definitely, if we could keep it to the confines of the existence of God, I'd be happy to do that. And also cultural debates, feminism, I'd be happy to debate feminism. So it would just depend on the topic of the debate. Because intricacies of policy, I wouldn't really necessarily do. Domestic policy in the US, not my greatest interests, but I'm sure I could research about it. I'd also be interested to debate things like climate change as well. So yeah, lots. Charlton Damas says, Andrew Wilson versus Richard Dawkins, bud. That would be incredible. Yeah, no, I don't think Richard Dawkins would heed the call there. Jim Bob versus Michael Malice. Funny you guys should say this. I've been trying to reach out to Michael Malice recently, but it's really hard to find his email. So if any of you guys can help me find his contact, if you guys can go and do some digging for me, that would be fantastic. But Michael Malice is a very staunch anarchist, if you guys don't know him. And I would love to see him tangle with Jim Bob or with Andrew or someone like that about anarchism, because I've seen him debate anarchism a lot, but I have a feeling that he'd have a very hard time against those guys. But he's a smart guy, so that would be very cool to see. Jeff Raidmaker says, do you watch Wise Disciple? He's doing a series of training videos for Christian debate. I watch Wise Disciple all the time. If you guys haven't checked out Wise Disciple, great YouTube channel. I've actually contacted Nate Sala from Wise Disciple, and I was going to do an in-person interview with him when I was in Nashville. But we're going to be in Nashville again in January and February. So I'm going to be, hopefully, if he has some time, I'll be interviewing him. But I've seen recently that he's been doing a series about how to defend Christianity. But I have to tell you guys, my knowledge is very rudimentary, very rudimentary. I could quote a handful of scripture, but what I really enjoy is understanding the stories and the ideas and the ideas of the arguments for God. Basically, that's what I'm really interested in. But I do need to brush up on my knowledge a lot. But there's so much to learn at the moment, doing all of these videos every single day. I'm on a new topic every single day. And then at nighttime, I study as much as I can, try to engage in debates on TikTok and everything. And we'll be doing more debates on here as well. One Canadian bachelor says, Def got to get Jim Bob versus this is Gay Santa. I don't know if you guys saw it recently, but Andrew was doing a TikTok invasion, and there was a guy called Gay Santa, and we had a bit of a. I had some stuff to say. It's a bit weird, isn't it, Gay Santa? Gay Santa, you gonna put your kid on his knee? I don't know. I wouldn't personally. But yes. So plenty more to come, guys. I'm glad you guys enjoyed this. And, you know, there was nearly 1,000 of you in here. We're going to be doing lots more debates. Something I want to do, because obviously with sort of debate analysis content, I enjoy doing that, but I want to make my own content, obviously, as well. And that's sort of the next step, to get a studio, to be making our own content, and to be doing things that it's a little bit more original as well, while still doing all of the debate analysis as well. So really appreciate you guys. You know, let me know any feedback you've got in the comments. If you guys want to reach out to me, you can go to my links just down in the bio there. And thank you, Dano, for the great moderating. Thank you, Vinny, for the moderating back there as well. And with that, have a great night, guys.